Hello, folks. All right. And we got most of you. I think there might be a few more um, on the list that we're going to join us, but we'll get started. How is everybody? Good. Everyone can hear me. I'm imagining. Awesome. All right. I'm going to put the chat on for those that don't know what I'm working off of. I know some of you may. I have a 75-inch screen in front of me right now. So if you write something in the chat, I'll be able to see it. It'll be on the side here. But by all means, feel free to turn on your cameras, turn on your microphones, speak. If you speak, it definitely makes things go well. But I'll try to ask you some questions as we go along. So by all means, makes things more engaging if you respond back, if you become part of this. So by all means, any questions you have along the way, by all means, shut them out. I can, I'm not, I'll keep moving on my stuff. So if you have any questions, by all means, throw them out. I'd rather, get them answered and, right on the spot when you're thinking about them. And we'll make sure that you get all of the information that you're hoping to get out of this so that we can I call this like preparing for college, but it's really, mastering college, mastering any type of classes. And it doesn't really matter what level you're at. This is really good along the entire way. But these are kind of things that I know that some of these things I learned, really, really early on, which was good. But I'm realizing as I teach, and for those that don't know, my name is the first one on the list. But for those that don't know me, I'm Professor Dan Shea. Dr. Shea won't join us today. He's enjoying a nice little vacation. So he was with us last in February, and he'll be again back for the April session. But I'm going to cover all of his parts as well, and I've been doing that. I do that as well. So, but I let him. He's the one that wrote them, so he covers them when he's here. So, but again, shout out by all means on unmute yourself. By all means, become part of this. Throw things in the chat, whatever you want, whatever's easier for you. And we're going to go through again. Key things would be note taking, where a lot of this I'm realizing, especially as we've gotten into more of a digital age, a lot of this may not be as inherent or assumed as we may think it, which should be or would be. And we're also not seeing things that we may have oops, sorry, my phone went off. My apologies. But things that we may have assumed along the way. There was a point where I would, when I was in class, and again, sitting next to the person next to you, and now with this digital age, again, we're on Zoom, which is a great example of what age we're in right now in 2025. But, if I was sitting at the table and I'd look at a person going, hey, can you explain to me what you're doing? Because those are really cool notes, and obviously we were in a room where we were full of people, right? You could look in both directions and you'd see people taking notes, and you're like, can you explain that to me? I want to know, how did you do that? Because now I'm going to learn, you know what? I learned something. And then another class, somebody's now watching me take my notes that I learned from you, and now they're learning from me. So we really did have, I remember going through my more traditional years, so almost a stone age ago, but feeling like I went through my traditional years, and we had a lot of that. And I had that through high school as well. So I carried that through my college years and my graduate school years as well. Now, the thing with that is, again, we're seeing, I'm going to go over some of the techniques that we use today. Test taking, that's the part that Dr. Shea usually covers, and that would be, I'm going to go over that. There's things about exams that you wouldn't assume, right? There's ways that we word questions that you may not take for granted. But I'm going to go over some of those things, how questions are worded and how to read them, but also how to be careful of certain words. So we'll go over that, and then studying, I'll cover that as well. As far as some of the techniques, I can get creative. So again, by all means, throw things in the chat. By all means, speak. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for your benefit. So we'll cover some of the ways that you can get creative with your studying, because studying is not just reading the book and trying to absorb as much knowledge as you can in a short period of time. That's not good studying at all, actually. I'm going to cover why that's not good studying, but I'm also going to cover some of the creative techniques that work best and help things get kind of in your memory for the very long term, because we're not studying for the quiz for tomorrow. We're studying for sometimes licensure exams that are years down the line, or we're studying for our career where we need to retain this knowledge and be able to apply it later. Or, what is on the final came from, even if it's a course that you're like, yeah, I'm never going to learn this again. That midterm and that final, and for this semester, for those, on a traditional semester, we just got past midterm week, but you're going from midterms, you're going from finals all the way through, and you have to remember stuff from the beginning. So we'll go over that a little bit. All right. So with note taking, how many of you have organized notes that look something similar to this Cornell method that I put up on the thing? So again, raise your hand, shout it out, throw it in the chat, whatever works best for you. But how many of you have nice organized notes where you took the time to kind of plan everything out? And I'm going to give a different method as well, but this is the Cornell method. How many of you do something that nice and organized? Okay. That one. But yeah, so again, notes, the more organized your notes are, the better off you're going to be in reviewing those, because how many of you, again, raise your hand, throw in the chat, speak it out. How many of you write your notes, and when you go back, you're like, I have not a clue what that meant? Or if you're like me, your handwriting is absolutely horrific and hieroglyphic, so you can't read it to begin with. How many of you just look back at your notes and you're like, I'm not really sure. Like, my notes really are, I'm putting things in my notes, but they're not really helping me. Maybe do it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. So with something like this, and a couple of different methods, this is the Cornell method. I'm going to teach you a 3-column method as well. The 3-column method is what I use when I'm taking notes. But this Cornell method is what you'll find a lot of people reference. So the key thing is the Cornell method, the Q column should have very few words in it. You could do symbols, hieroglyphics, have fun, but very few words, very few symbols, very few anything. Then the main body of that is where you're actually taking your notes. That's what you're doing during class. You can prepare notes ahead of class, and I'll mention how that you do that. And then that summary at the bottom is where we bring it all together. So the way I would do this, so your Q column is going ahead, looking at the book, and finding those bold words at the top of the chapter, the bold words at the top of those paragraphs, right? And that's going to be the topic of the day. Now we have our main thing, and that's really what I'm titling the page. That's, I'm going to pick on anatomy for a minute, okay? So axial skeleton, we're going over the axial skeleton. Well, then in that left column, I'm going down, and there's the, layers of bone, right? So that's a topic I'm going to put. I'm going to say the bones in the axial skeleton is another topic. I could say, maybe flat bones versus, long bones. So like, you could go through, depending on parts of anatomy you're talking about, we could go through and we could create these different things in the Q column. Now, they're very spaced out, and lots of space is good, because when you're lecturing, or when you're listening to lecture, sorry, when you're listening to that lecture, how fast does your professor speak? Can you write it all, right? So that person's rambling on. And as they ramble on, you're trying to keep up with what's going on. But if you wrote key things ahead, I don't have to write the titles because I already wrote them. And then in that notes area, I started myself off. I started myself off with some of the key things I took from the textbook. Because why am I during lecture writing things that I could have written before? Why am I going to waste my time writing all of these beautiful things that were in the textbook? So when we say read the textbook ahead, we also mean take notes from it. So you're starting with that, taking notes, and you start getting all of that written down. And we can big spaces. And the 3-column method is going to make a little more sense when I say with spaces. I find that a little easier with the spaces. But same thing here. I'm leaving big spaces, and I'm not filling the page, right? Then when all of a sudden now the lecture is taking place, you don't have to write all of those things that were already there. They were already in the textbook, because any good professor, any good faculty member should not be reading the book to you. They should not be just lecturing what's on the book. Their job is to teach you what is between those lines, to take what is on that textbook and translate that to something that you can understand, or translate that to something that with an example. Stories work, right? And you might say, my professor only does those stories, but sometimes you might remember those stories because you're relating the topic that you read about, because that was your job. Your job was to read, and the professor's job was to translate it. So now you're getting that translation, and in that you now put in those translations, right? You might go, oh yeah, that was that was where they told this story about the child that did this. Right. Now you may remember the story, but you're going to make a little bit of a note as to that was the story with the student, or the child that did this in the situation. Okay. So now you do that. So now your notes are well organized because you're writing them in your own environment. You're writing them quick. And then all you have to write is those other key items. Now the summary comes into, this is after the lecture. This is when you get back. This is where you kind of look through your notes. And now you kind of take some time to say, let me summarize some of the key points that I've noticed that between what the professor said and my notes from before, maybe I can sum up a few things in my own words, or maybe I can use this area to kind of make little tricks, okay? Honestly, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you. And when I get into studying, I'll say this again, but I don't care how obscene it is. I don't care how raunchy it is. I don't care if it makes sense to anybody, or if you're a camper or a hiker or a skier or a cooker or whatever you do, okay? If it makes sense to you, if that bone makes you think of the ladle you stir soup with, that makes sense to you, okay? Or again, you don't have to say these things out loud, so it can be obscene, okay? You can have fun with this, right? Whatever your mind wants to run with, because now in your summary, you're relating something to something else that you may think is funny. Or and that helps you remember it. So you run the summary and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That was the way I'm going to remember that. Okay. So the next thing would be the 3-column method. This is what I use. I use the 3-column method. So with the 3-column method, I'm doing what I already kind of stated, but I'm organizing it a little different. So the key ideas, what's on the left of that is what I kind of pulled off of Google. I pulled what someone else put, and then I created what's onto the right. So this is my wording of the titles. So, but the key ideas are kind of two things. It's taking the bold words from the book. It's breaking those things down. But what I do is, rather than writing key ideas to make a little bit more sense of what you're doing, I call a book. So writing the book and then anything else you find. So I'm taking my book notes. I'm literally going through and making book notes. And I'm leaving big spaces because I do need to make sure the other columns don't run out of space. So I'm writing key factors, key words. Maybe I'm writing some definitions. I'm writing whatever I can into that thin column. And this is literally my notepad paper. I folded it into 3 pieces and I literally have a crease. Or you can sit there and draw lines, 3 lines or whatever it is, okay? Or if you want to sit there and make your own little notebooks, print out pages that look like this as a template without the words book, concept, and lecture. Of course, you can put things in there that, like the subject and things like that, and the chapter numbers. But you could create these, or again, I always just took those notebooks and I folded them 3 ways and I had a crease, and I used the crease as my way. So, but you're taking all your book notes. That's all done ahead of time. Again, I don't have to write them again, right? They're all done. Now I skipped a column. And I'm now taking, during class, I'm now taking notes, but those notes are aligning with what I did in the book column. Because now I don't have to write anything that's here. I don't have to write. I'm now paying attention to the lecture. I'm not trying to write as fast as I can. It was in the book. I don't have to write it. So now I'm just writing only those things I have to. Which means I can use abbreviations. I can write things much shorter. I can do just what I need to fill in, little hints that I have to remember. Now I go back. And that connect the concepts column, again, you can call this what you want. the connect the concepts column or the details column if you're using the one on the left. Same thing. So now this is the point where I look up and say, Professor Shea was talking about this component of the bone, right? I don't remember what that was. That didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. But let me look that up, right? Or he used this term. It wasn't a term the textbook used. He used this term in his class. So you wrote it down. You wrote it down in the lecture notes. But now what you did was you went back and you said, let me look that word up. So now you rewrite that word, and then you write what the definition of that word is. So now next time you remember that word is because you have a reference, right? Because it was a word that your professor spewed out. Maybe it made sense, maybe it did. Maybe you looked it up and said, oh, that was just meant nothing. He was just using a big word. But it can't hurt, write it down. Or maybe you looked and you're like, yeah, I'm still not understanding. I need a picture of something. So now I Google the picture of the heart because Professor Shea's talking about the chambers of the heart and all of these things, right? But now you could Google that image and maybe you sit there and maybe you're a good artist. Maybe you draw in that. You didn't have time to draw during class, but you took the time to draw that out. Or maybe you pasted it and you took a little bit of stick glue and you stick glued that little cutout you did, and it gives you a little place to paste it right next to your notes. So now you have your book notes, you have your lecture notes, and you have this nice image that was either hand-drawn, or if you're not an artist, just like myself, you can print things out and paste them. That would be my method. So then I now have the Googled image. But you can see where that is. Now, that appendicular skeleton is going to make sense because I'm going to use that because that somewhere else in this, I've been using the same chapter of an old anatomy textbook that's sat in my office to put this together. All right. So the other thing would be to keep things colorful, keep things organized. Now, with this, does anybody disagree that this is, that these colors make things stand out, right? Everybody find this easier? How many people find this easier when you're looking going, language, direction, time, quantity? Like, one, you were distracting your mind because how many of you love to doodle on the paper, right? So it kind of, as you're listening, you're kind of doodling, right? Writing the word language or something. But this made it a little bit easier to, it makes it a little bit easier to stand out because now I'm flipping through pages and pages and pages of notes. And as I'm doing that, I'm trying to find where language was, direction, time, and quantity. I can't find it. I can because it stands out. And maybe this was something I did after the fact, right? Maybe this is something that I went in after the fact. But again, how many of you sit there and doodle, right? So while you're doing it, you're sitting there coloring in the letters. There's no harm in that because you did your notes ahead of time so that you don't have to do as much writing during the lecture. So now you have the time to do that, right? And this person wrote next to the direction, they wrote a compass. So maybe that was a quick little doodle. Maybe you remembered what north, south, east, and west was, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe you're a good artist on the spot and you can doodle a heart or whatever that may be. Now, the other thing is to try to keep your notes as short and sweet as possible, right? So one of the things is, so this is the textbook, but let's go back to your notes. So now with all of these words that we have, how quickly can you write the word, right? So I'm going to pick on the word appendicular skeleton because I'm using that as my example throughout this. So appendicular skeleton, right? Well, by the time you got to writing appendicular skeleton, your professor was well beyond that. He was giving you the definition. He or she was giving you the definition of appendicular skeleton. He was talking about the bones in the appendicular skeleton, right? Or maybe we were talking about language and you're sitting there trying to still write out the title of something, and they've already listed all of the poems and sonnets that fit that, whatever the case may be. But because you sat there and wrote out those words. So abbreviations are key when you're writing things as well. That's going to help you speed yourself up quite a bit. Having a key also helps. So well ahead of time, go through when you're writing the book, have a little piece of paper off to the side. You're writing a little like cheat sheet And so every time something comes up, you can do that. So now, if you're doing anything in the sciences, medical terminology is key. Just stick to professional medical terminology because you're learning medical terminology the same time that you're taking your notes. And you can take your notes using medical terminology. It speeds things up drastically, but then you're also making sure that what you're using for the rest of your career or knowledge pertains to the official. If you're engineering, same thing. If you're using professional engineering, abbreviations for things, then you're also practicing your professional abbreviations along with it. So you can stick with things that match. But if you have something that doesn't have an abbreviation, start writing though. And even for those professional ones, have a notepad that you're doing that. So off the side, I'm writing things and, okay, right. I'm trying to remember abdomen. I don't have to write it out because the professional medical abbreviation for that is ABD. Right? Or with is a C with a line over it. Without is an S with a line over it. Those are medical abbreviations. So I can speed up as I'm writing, say, with this, without that, and it speeds up your note taking quite a bit. But now we're writing something. Again, I come from the funeral department. So embalming, that's a long word. So EMB, done, embalming, right? So now I just know I don't need my notes anymore because I don't need my abbreviation for them because I already know that EMB means thing, FH means funeral home, FD means funeral director, whatever the case may be. So, but any other words, I have that and I can reference them. And I did this as I went through the book because I was like, oh, wow, that's a big word. I'm going to need to do that. So I created an abbreviation. All right. So it does speed things up quite a bit. All right. So how many of you, tell me left or right, how many of you if you were to highlight your textbook, does it look like the left? And how many of you does your highlighting look like the right on this? Same textbook. All right, so we're seeing a lot of lefts in this. Okay. How many of you find the left the left easier to find what you're looking for, or the right easier to find what you're looking for while you're searching through your textbook? Yeah. All right, so we've all admitted that we're doing the left, and we've all admitted that the right is better. Okay, great. So exactly, and that's what I'm looking for. So the key thing with this is the more you highlight, and we're all guilty of this, okay? I've gotten a lot of used textbooks where I'm like, all right, there's no space for my highlighting. But and then you get some that I'm like, wow, this person did a great job highlighting. I've done that when I've gone through the bookstore. I know you order things online a lot now where you say, I need my textbook and the bookstore delivers them. But I want to say back in my day, but it's true. But you go to the bookstore and you'd look through and you're like, all right, I'm going through the pile of books and I'm trying to find the one that either had no highlighting so I could do my own, or I'm looking through to find the book that was perfectly highlighted so I didn't have to do it at all. And somebody did a good job for me, or I get the one where someone took really good notes in the margin of whatever their professor said, and they were taking really good notes in the margins. Then that I always love those as well. I still have a couple of those to this day on my bookshelf. But yeah, so when you're looking for something, right? Do I need the full word? No, because my eyes are not going to find what I'm looking for. Right? So let's look at the one on the right again. I'm trying to find appendicular scalp. I mean, just keep blending in, right? There's just all the yellow is blending. Versus I'm looking for, I already know the skeleton. I'm in the skeletal chapter. I don't need to highlight the word skeleton, but I'm looking for which one. Is it appendicular or, axial? Right? So I need to figure out which skeleton I'm looking for. I'm looking for appendicular. Boom. Okay. Or am I looking for axial? And then again, this is just a random, and the book's not actually highlighted. I highlighted this all digitally, but this is just a random anatomy textbook that I just pulled off of the shelf in front of me in my office across the street. So just did this at random. So at this, again, I don't need all of those words. I don't need limbs because I'm just looking for upper and lower. Okay, where in this paragraph am I looking for the upper or lower? All right, I'm looking for pectoral. All right, again, I don't need to see all these words where it blends together. I'm just trying to find the key part of that word. I know that's one word, pectoral girdle. Well, it's not one word, it's two words that go together, but I know that goes together. But again, pectoral was the defining word from that because I'm only looking part of it. The thing with that when we're highlighting is that we forget that we can still read the rest of the words. we're not crossing them out. We're not putting a big Sharpie through them. We can still see them. So if you don't highlight it, it's still there. It's still visible. So when you're highlighting, and you guys all agreed to the right, when you're highlighting, only highlight minimally just parts of words or parts of paragraphs. So again, just the word pectoral made that stand out among other bones or bone areas compared, okay? I highlighted the word S-shaped because I'm looking for the key thing was, what's the S-shaped bone? I was trying to look for that one, right? That one's fragile or pressure stress or direct connections or broken or fractured. So I need to figure out where I'm talking about fractures. All right, where was the fractures in this big long paragraph? I just need to find where it starts talking about fractures. So again, minimal. Okay. So key pieces of this, right? So this is, how many of you, good, next question. How many of you use AI for anything? Not just note taking, just how many of you use AI for generating things, writing papers, for, making art, to do something, takes your notes for you? What do you do? I use AI to do my scheduling. I can tell my phone and it schedules everything for me. Explain topics, okay. Yeah, AI is becoming more and more. We're using it for a lot of things. Again, I talk to my phone while I'm in the shower. I tell it what I need to do, and it starts. You're probably using AI and you don't even realize it, actually. And it's so incorporated into everything that we do that it's so behind the scenes. And that's the thing too, is again, I told my phone has an app that schedules everything. If I miss it, it auto schedules it. It knows what topics are priority. It does everything for me, right? If you Google something now and you just say, what is, what is this, right? And you pick a topic. Google now has an AI section at the top, and it tells you the AI answer because it searched websites and it figured it out on its own. And it says, well, the answer is probably this. Now, we've proven that AI feature of Google wrong many times in my classes because the students say, whoa, Google said this. All right, showing me the page. And before they even do it, I just Google myself. I said, what did you type? I'm like, all right. And it's come up because I teach the board comp class, so we do this a lot, where they question the questions, and that's good. That's what I want. That's part of the class. So in doing that, we look it up, and on Google it says the exact answer that they're saying. I'm like, oh, that's interesting because the AI is wrong. But it's basing it off of heaven only knows whose website went out there, and it searched, and it didn't know the difference between the legit items or the incorrect items, and it pulled the incorrect ones. So, but if I was looking at specific websites, I could tell you that that website was legit or not, right? So, those are the things. Especially if you're talking my area of expertise, I'm going to know the answer to that, and I can tell you how wrong that AI was. But at the same time, it does have some good values as well. It does help speed things up. It does give us stuff. But something you have to be careful about is the note-taking aspect of this. So in this case, I just wrote, I spoke to myself for a couple minutes, and I gave myself a little bit of a miniature lecture, and that's that white box you see to the top right. Right? So I basically spoke to myself, and if you close your eyes and just think about what I'm saying, if your eyes are closed, or if you were AI just doing your notes for you, right? You pay for something to take notes for you electronically. And all of a sudden the professor is saying, as you see the heart's four chambers wrap around, right? Now, do you think that I'm talking with empty hands? No, I got a heart in my hand. I got a real heart, or I got a plastic heart, or I got something in my hand, right? And that's how I'm going to lecture. Right? I'm just saying, as you can see, the heart's four chambers, they wrap around. They don't resemble the boxes your teacher drew on the board. The blood enters through the vena cava into the right atrium. As you see, the valve prevents blood from moving backwards as it moves through the ventricle. Blood then moves from the pulmonary circulation before re-entering the heart. The coronary arteries are fed by the sinus just as the blood passes through the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. And I continue from there. But as you can see, I was motioning with my hands. Okay, I'm pretending I had a heart in my hand. And one of these times I'll remember to just grab the heart from the other classroom before I come in here so that I could actually do that, right? But in a real lecture, what would I be doing, right? I'm holding that heart. And as my hands are moving, I'm motioning the pulmonary vein. I'm motioning. I open up a flap on that heart and I'm pointing at the valve. Right? So I said it prevents blood from going backwards. And I'm holding that valve. And I said, now I'm not describing it. I'm pointing at it. You, the student, can then see what I'm pointing at. Right? There's things that I'm doing that I'm not saying. There's things where I'm playing with that valve and you can see that it can't go backwards. You can see the strings, the chordae tendae, that are coming from the heart that are attached to that valve that are preventing that valve from going backwards, prolapsing. But guess what? You shut your eyes and you don't pay attention and you're half listening. You're right, you got Zoom on, we all do it. Right? That's how I go through most meetings, right? You turn on Zoom and you're like, this is not a meeting I want to attend. Right? And what are you doing? I have a 49-inch screen in my office over there. It's nice. Oh, it's a nice 49-inch gaming screen. I got it half the price. It's awesome. And it sits over there, right? Do you think I'm doing? No, I got the Zoom meeting over here, right? I put the Zoom meeting over there, and I got whatever hell I'm typing up just happens to be right in front of the camera. Except for the Zoom thing's going on over here, right? I don't want to be in the meeting. We know none of us want to be there. So what are we doing? We're half paying attention. But if you're in class and you're doing that, and all of a sudden the professor's pointing at things and describing things and playing with things, I never mentioned the chordae tendae. I pointed at them. I played with them, right? I mentioned the sinus where that blood's going to the coronary arteries. You just missed a visual of seeing that sinus. I just talked about it and you're like, oh, sinus. But you're not mentally able to visualize that sinus. You're not able to conceptualize what the hell is this dude talking about. But you can see the hole when I point at it. So that's the thing. So now I broke this into two pieces. Eyes closed and AI. What did AI gather? Or if you were half paying attention, if you were just taking notes, mentally with your eyes closed, what did you gather out of this, right? You got heart, got 4 chambers, and it wraps around. Blood into the vena cava. You got all of these things on the left, right? But your eyes are open. You paid attention to the fact that I had the heart. Again, one of these days I'm going to remember to bring the dang heart from the other room into this room with me when I do this. But, here you have this heart in your hands. And I'm describing it. And what are you doing? You're getting much better notes. And you took notes. But I also want to point out how I took these notes. I was using short abbreviations for things here. So on this, I put 4 chambers, order of blood flow, right? I filled those in. Now, some of this I may have done it. I could do this after the fact. Maybe it wasn't there. I took quick notes. And then I went back and cleaned up my notes to organize them. You can do that, and I would encourage that. But in this case, I went right atrium from the superior vena cava. I abbreviate that sub-VC, right? So from the superior vena cava, and I did an abbreviation. That sped things up, so I didn't have to write this word. I would be lost, and I wouldn't catch everything if I did. All right, next thing was right ventricle. Now you notice that I put in pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, and I put them in brackets because I was indicating that that's not part of the heart. I did kind of like, hey, it left the heart, and it did these things in brackets, and it came back. So that was my way of saying, all right, I'm telling myself that this is still part of the picture, but I don't want to forget them. But this is things that are outside the heart. Now I used a different bracket, a fancier bracket that says coronary sinus atrium. Okay, so that was telling me that was another piece of that puzzle. Right? Then I have parts of the heart again. I have the left atrium that goes to the left ventricle. Then that goes to the aorta. Right? Aorta is on top of the heart. So again, not part of the heart. I put in brackets. Then another part, notes, those valves don't invert. They don't turn inside. Now I indented before I wrote chordae tendae because that is why they don't invert. Then I gave myself a little bit of a note that said it holds those valves in place. Now, again, if you're a good artist, you could draw, and I found this is just literally, I Googled hand-drawn heart. Okay, that's literally hand-drawn coronary arteries. That's literally what I drew here. But because I'm not an artist, so I wanted a hand-drawn so you could see that this is what you could do. It was a simple drawing. It's nothing complex. But if you were sitting there and someone's drawing on the board or you see someone on the slide, that's a quick enough thing that you could draw that on your notebook pretty quick. Most people could, and then take quick notes as to what you're labeling. Okay. Or you go back and you take your time after and you're like, all right, I have a crappy drawing. Now let me go back and let me do a prettier drawing. Now I can take my time, or again, let me Google an image and let me cut that out and let me paste that over what I'm looking for. You have that option. All right. All right. So next question, how many of you are taking your notes by hand, and how many of you are taking your notes electronically, like typing them or using GoodNotes or Notally or something like that? How many of you are by hand and I? Okay, so we have a lot of handwritten ones. Okay. Okay. All right. So you're going back and you're doing them afterwards. You're redoing them with GoodNotes. Okay, that's good. And I like that too. I mean, if I'm in the classroom, I do everything on, like if I'm a student in the classroom, I do everything on paper because I bring my bag with me and I'm going to go back to my car and it's out there and all of that. But if I go to like conferences and yeah, and doing it by hand definitely does have it has better retention, as I put on the slide too, but it has better retention abilities. And if I go to a conference, I do have my tablet does have remember Notely or GoodNotes. I can't remember what I have on there, but I have one of them, and I'll use those when I go to conferences if I have to take it, just because I'm running around and I don't have too many different things. Or a lot of times I'll just take notes on the corner of whatever the hell I can find, any handout. I'll take notes on the back of it, but but at least I can bring that with me and have that tablet with me, and I don't have to walk around all day with too many things. But so you can have that, or going back. So again, you hand wrote everything, and then you went and typed it up so that it was more organized, or maybe you rewrite it. You're saying maybe you go back and maybe you're using notes. You can use GoodNotes later or Notally later, or rewrite it. So there's a benefit to both. The good thing about electronic is that it's organized. You can use templates. So rather than having to do things, you could sit there and say, oh, okay, I'm in a class, I need graph paper. You just literally click the quick thing if you're using something like Notally or GoodNotes, you click the thing on the side and boom, you have graph paper. Or you have the ability to put in photos later, right? So I can go back and I can just take a photo of a heart and I can put the photo of the heart in. Or I can, fix something. It's a little bit more organized. It can be typed. If you're quicker at typing, then you might be able to do that. But again, you're also dealing with technology, right? So it's not like I can write over here and write over here quick. I got to be able to move, and I got mice, and things can scroll uncontrollably, things like that. But the benefit is you got multimedia. The bad news is you got to have batteries. Again, I designed this room and the room on the other side of this wall. I'm the one that worked with the architect for those. So every one of these tables has plugs going all the way down this wall. Okay. Then these columns have plugs on both sides of the columns as well. The same thing in the other one. Why? Because I thought this one through and said, hey, people have computers, people have technology. We're always doing something. I need plugs for every table because the one priority is people are going to be plugging in their laptops. Right. But at the end of the day, I was in Tacoma, Washington, the first week of February. Colleague next to me goes, wow, you're going old fashioned. And I just had a piece of paper and a notepad. She goes, you're not going to try to get work done while during the seminars? And she was saying they were doing their work for their these are my colleagues from across the country, and they were doing their work for their colleges, while they're going through the seminar, they're half listening and they're doing work. And I said, I'm like, my battery doesn't last. The battery needs to be plugged in, and the plug is way over there behind me. I can't do that, right? So you're looking at everyone sharing plugs. The few plugs along the conference center wall, Everyone's plugging things in. They got their phone over there. They got their computer leaning up to the wall. They're charging enough to go do some work and go back. So, that's the problem with technology, is that it does require a battery. It does have glitches. What happens if something happens? You drop it, you lose it. If I drop my notebook or I drop coffee on it, I might be able to look through there and try to figure out what my notes say through the coffee stain. If I drop my laptop or drop coffee on it, it can completely fry it. I could lose all the data. So there's, you have that glitch factor. Versus the handwritten, and I did skip something on the electronic. I'm going to come back to that. The handwritten notes, again, this has been proven that you have much better retention with this. If you handwrite something, you get much better retention. You have the flexibility of bouncing all over the place, right? I can go page to page. If you're doing that, maybe you have different parts. Maybe you can put bookmarks or put paper clips on things that make it easier to go between things and try to take notes in different parts a little easier than trying to find the right page electronic. Oh, that was this one. So there's that. Reduced distraction. This is the biggest one, right? Again, I have college students every day. This is what I do for a living. And what do? Okay, everyone's on their phone. Did orientation in this room. We disassembled this entire room, put a power wall circle in the center. And as soon as I walk in, I put games in the center of the room. I have, people in the back of the room, all the support services ready to talk to them, financial aid, wellness, everybody's here. And what does everyone do? They send their power wall circle and they all have their phones. Right? So this is our mentality. So when we have technology in front of us, how many of you, if you had your laptop in front of you while you're in class, all of a sudden the quick thing is, oh, let me Google that. Or, oh, I'm wondering what that is. Let me look it up now. Or, sometimes a benefit. Sometimes you have a professor like me that says, hey, can someone look this up? And someone does, and they give me the answer while I continue my lecture. If we question something, rather than me looking it up and wasting lecture time, one of the students can look it up, and that's great. But how many of you, all of a sudden, notifications are popping up, right? You got Facebook notification pop up, Twitter notification pops up, Instagram pops up. All of a sudden, your emails are popping up. Oh, let me look at that, right? Oh, I wonder when my next class, hold on, what was that? I can't remember what the thing was that I had to do for my next class. Well, you're not in the next class, you're in my class, okay? So we're going to worry about my class today. And, but it does get very distracting. Whereas if you have a notebook, you're now focused. You're in class, notebook, 100% focused, distractions are away, right? They're not part of that. But the downside of that is that you could have really bad handwriting like myself, where you can't find it, or the organization, right? Once you write something, it's hard to kind of shift it over and add to it. Whereas on a document, you could add things. If you're not using Notely or GoodNotes, I use PowerPoint a lot because I can put little, I can type things, but then things stay right where I want them. So when I can just click slides and I can go to different parts. I use that a lot too for different things. But I turn it in. You can make it a page. If you didn't know that, you can change the slide size to be like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or whatever size you want it to be. And that becomes a document. You can do it. You can design things, but whatever you put stays exactly where you put the text box. Unlike Word, with things shift all over the place. Messy, rushed. It's hard to review. You have to go back and forth. But limited sharing versus collaboration. So the electronic has collaboration, limited sharing. So this is a thing. It's once I have my notes. We've been doing this since the Stone Age, okay? If my classmate was sick, they said, hey, can I have your notes? They never asked me for my notes because they were messy as hell, so nobody wanted mine. They found somebody else after that. But what did I do? You went down and this is, before cell phones, you went down and you just use the photocopier. Nowadays, you just take a little picture of it. You can email it to your friends. The ability to share things is still there. We're not losing that. The technology is there. We can scan things and send them, take pictures, send them. That's not the big issue. But when it comes to collaboration, the electronic does have that ability. So one thing that people have done is they will work together in a classroom. So let's say you have a very difficult class. I can type really fast, but you're more of the artist. And somebody else, but somebody else is able to pay attention to the fine details and explain things. So I can type fast, but I may be missing the concepts, right? But you can understand what those concepts are. So what we do is we all have a shared document, like a shared Word doc, Google Doc. And we keep that all open. We all have it open on our desks. And while I'm typing as fast as I can, trying to get those notes down, maybe you're good at reading the book and you can go through and maybe you did all the pre-book notes. So you did one person did the pre-book notes. I went and I'm really good at fastly listening and typing fast in the lecture, right? So I could do that. Then we have the person that's really just good as the artist. So they're sitting there with their pen on their touch screen and they're sitting there drawing the heart off to the side of the notes that I'm typing. Right? I can't do both at the same time, but this person's just listening and they're not having to worry about typing notes because I'm doing that for them, but they're drawing the heart and they're doing a really good job of doing the visualization of what I'm sitting there talking about the chart, and they're able to give that visual, something I couldn't do. I don't have that. I can have the typing ability. I don't have the drawing ability. And then the other person, meanwhile, I also am leaving spaces, right? Because I'm like, bracket question mark, bracket question mark, bracket question mark. And I'm going through because there was something I missed. I typed something, but there was just something I missed, right? So then there's that person that's sitting there going through going, oh, this is what Professor Shea said. And, and basically just going through and fixing the notes to do that. Or you're all taking notes and then you have a shared document where you go back after. So everyone takes their own notes. And then the thing with collaboration, you go back and you kind of merge your notes. So now you're like, all right, well, here's my notes. I'm looking at, here's the general document. We all kind of put them in. And then, all right, I'll edit this, you edit that. And before you know it, you have a collaboration because, again, maybe you did all things on your own, but then you went back and you kind of added to a group collective note system so that you could share. Like any group work, you want everyone to participate. Obviously, give the boot to the person. That does not help you. But, things like that, you can benefit off of each other's. So there's plus and minuses, obviously, on that. All right. So you're going to notice a lot of photos when you get to the my father's section here. Here's a lot of photos. All right. So the first rule, I'm going to cover so studying should be kind of covered twice because this is his study section, and then I'm going to cover the more creative studies pieces a little bit after test taking. So we'll do studying, test taking, studying again. All right. Any question on note taking before I move on to studying? Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So, preparing, so Regina's saying preparing the slides and then PowerPoints and then taking notes on them, and that's helpful too, and you can create things too. And it doesn't hurt to go in, like, even if you're doing things like visuals, again, if you like to draw things and you like doing things, if you wanted to create your notes, like I said, having that template of those 3 columns well ahead of time, yeah, you can do, you could do things on paper, or one thing is if you wanted to create a handwritten thing, I could create ahead of time, use a PowerPoint template. I curate my 3 columns on PowerPoint, right? I kind of create a template on there. And then I create an 8.5 by 11. I change the slide size to 8.5 by 11. I create whatever I want. And then now what I can do is I could now type out, because they're a little bit better than my handwriting, I could type out in that left column, the book things, I can take all my book notes. Then what I can do, it's absolutely better to break it up in pieces. And I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you that in a minute as well. And the, so I could have that left column, and then I might be able to find some images ahead of time where I might be able to, create images. I know that the professor's going to talk about the heart. I know he's going to talk about the skeleton. So maybe I take a picture and I copy and paste off the web a picture of the axial skeleton, or the appendicular skeleton, or of the heart, or of the cardiovascular system, or whatever the case may be. Right? Or maybe I already know that this image, maybe I'm in an art class and I know that this lecture is going to talk about Van Gogh and it's going to be describing the Starry Night image. And I already know that. So what do? I take the Starry Night image and I blow it up to the size of of that 8.5 by 11, slide that I created, again, portrait shaped slide, and I just put it on there and I give myself enough spaces for notes below it. And now what I can do is then I can go and print all of these pre-made notes that I've made myself spaces by typing those out ahead from the book, and then inputting pictures that I know I'm going to need these pictures. I know the professor's going to be talking about the heart. I know he's talking about the appendicular skeleton. I know he's going to be talking about Starry Night by Van Gogh. I know he's going to talk about something. So what I do is I put all of these things in, and then I created my own note-taking stuff. So now I print them out, and then during lecture, all you're doing is you're now using that last column to take all of your lecture notes, but it was organized because the lines were there. And then all of a sudden he gets to, oh, he's talking about Starry Night. I flip to it. Now I'm pointing out features of that because now I know he's going to have that up on a slide. That's guaranteed. He's going to talk about this during this lecture, or he's going to talk about, Professor Shea's talking about the heart again. So let me print out a page that's half of that page is the heart, and the other half gives me blank space to write on. So now, rather than trying to take notes and drawing something, I did ahead of time. And I went and I like, all right, hold on. This is where the coronary sinus is. Oh, this was this, and then, maybe I draw stenosis, on the aorta. Maybe I draw, in an area where, the heart was, if it's an ischemic attack, right, a heart attack, do that, and I can label that and say, this is what happens when this happens. But I can draw pictures and I can label, but I already have that. All right, so again, breaking up your studying into pieces, and that's a key thing, and I'm gonna show you that in a minute on a chart as well. But that number one piece is to relax, right? And again, if you guys have any questions, by all means, throw them out too, and I'll answer questions as you go too. So if the one thing is relax, right? If you're calm, you're going to retain the knowledge better, right? If you're nervous and you're rushing to try to study, what you're doing is you're building up this hype that's also putting a barrier for you to retain knowledge. You might get it in the short term, and you may think you got it, but you're not getting it for the long term, and that's important, right? And sticking to a schedule to avoid distractions means also creating points where you, breaking things up is important, but creating periods in your day where you're like, this is what I have to do, right? How many of you have done something similar to, like, you get a gym membership, $10 a month, it's great, right? You're going to go to the gym, and all of a sudden, first month, you're doing pretty good, New Year's resolution. By the second month, all of a sudden, something comes up, and you're like, oh, I'll push that off. And then you don't go to the gym again, and then, do that next week, and then you go again, and then eventually, before you know it, you're like, why did I spend money on a gym membership, right? So it's the same thing with studying, right? How many of you are even worse when it comes to studying? Right? I'm going to study, and then all of a sudden someone wants to go to dinner, or, something comes up, or you got a paper to write and you pushed off something else. You pushed off that paper, you pushed off studying, right? We do it all the time. So the same thing is, this is very important, especially if you're on an online class. If you're in an online classes, I can't urge this enough, take periods, right? So if your class is, normally you're in person, 9 to 8 to like 10:40, 10:15 or whatever, you have a single day class or whatever it is, or maybe an hour and 15 minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's how your class runs. But do the same thing for online classes. Budget in, say I have an hour and 15 minutes twice a week for this class where I have to view lectures and participate in the class and do all of that stuff, do discussion boards. You have to log in 3 times a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I log in on an online class. Monday, I write my initial discussion board post, and I check anything at the same time. I give myself some time to check to see if anything is due that week. Is there anything different? I see if there's any announcements. I check in on Wednesday. I make a reply to my colleagues, to my classmates, based off of their initial posts. And I also check and see, is there any announcements? Is there anything changed? Is there anything in there that I'm going to miss? Then Friday, I log in again, and I'm replying to replies. I'm continuing the conversation. This is the best way to ever do online class. Online classes suck if people don't reply on replies, right? They also suck if the professor gave you a discussion board post that was just a simple question that everyone gives the same answer to, right? And I'm sure many of you have noticed that if you take an online class. That is not the way to get an online question. Because if everyone's got the same answer, that's pretty straightforward, right? That's not a good discussion board post. When you find things that are heated, they're going to start debate and arguments. This is good arguments. We're academia here, okay? We like good arguments. Good arguments, they're going to start you to think, okay? It's okay to argue. It's okay to think. You're allowed to think. That's why we're in college. Because you know what? Challenge your norm. Challenge your thought process. And what you do is it's okay to have good, educated, evidence-based things that now when you reply, you give someone, say, well, I think this. It's okay to challenge them. Don't just agree. Give them challenges. And then on Friday, you log in again and you continue that debate. If not every, or if you get a really good heated debate, log in like multiple times a day and really keep that discussion going, right? You'd be amazed at how good these classes can become if you keep those discussion boards. But then on Sunday, again, I'm logging in, but there's a point I have to take my quizzes. There's a point my papers are due. There's a point that something's due. So you want to keep that up. But again, give yourself a scheduled day time. Now things come up. But if something comes up, what you do is on your calendar, you move that time slot. And the same thing goes for studying. If I put, this is my time slot that I'm going to study. I'm going to talk about a different type of studying as well in a minute. But if you give yourself blocks where you have to write reports, you have to read the textbook. I'm going to talk about integrating studying in a minute, but taking time to read the textbook, taking time to, again, write reports, all that. Then if you don't do it, you move that time block somewhere else on your calendar. I'm going to talk about some apps that do some really amazing things towards the end. I'll put up the information about those, but those help you as well. Reward yourself, okay? Now, Ranger down here loves, if you've seen the dog that's been walking by, Ranger loves to get treats for anything, for doing absolutely nothing. He knows you have treats in your desk drawer and he will find you, okay? That's Ranger. But reward yourself, okay? It's okay to give yourself goals, okay? You don't have to give yourself a dog biscuit, but you can give yourself goals. And I will talk about goals in a minute, all right? We'll get into that. All right. And the other thing is building in rest periods are important. Again, I'm going to talk about integrating things in, but don't just sit there and just hound for hours and hours and hours. You're basically burning your brain out. So that is not good as well. Again, I'm going to get in I'm going to talk a lot more about studying later, so I'm not putting as much emphasis on these study areas, but as I will later. So the 5 effective study steps here. First, survey the material so that you know what you're getting yourself into, right? Kind of, before you read the chapter, just kind of flip through the pages and kind of see what you see, right? I might see charts that are later on. I might see pictures that are later on. I might see how long the chapter is. So now I know how much time it's going to take me to do this. I can also see that there's pictures. So if I'm reading something, I'd be like, hey, I think there was a picture for that or a chart for that. Let me flip 3 pages. Oh, that's the chart. Okay, let me reference what I'm reading on this page to the chart so that I knew that chart was there, or I knew that image was there, and I knew that was going to help me by flipping back and forth. The next thing is think of everything as a question. Okay? So don't just read the material and say, the axial skeleton is this. Think about when you're reading it, say, what are the bones of the axial skeleton? That's a question, right? So when you're reading things, when you're studying things, you're thinking of them as questions because you're integrating it into your mind. Your brain works in different ways, and we have to tap into all those different ways to get our brain to work effectively. Then reading actively, okay? So question things. Don't just take anything for granted. So never take anything for granted, right? We don't just read something and say, oh, okay, those are the bones of the axial skeleton. Why are those the bones of the axial skeleton? Why does the body's pH change? Why does the body move in a certain way? Why do those muscles move the way they do? Why do muscles contract at a certain time and they don't do the other things? Why did Van Gogh draw a Starry Night the way he did? Why does the Mona Lisa look the way it does? Why was that sonnet or that poem written the way it was, right? Why is that bridge built by that structure, right? Why are those support beams where they are? So we have to question, everything is a question. Challenge the world. The most important thing in academia, challenge the world and question why. Because curiosity is what makes you learn. Curiosity is your point to just say, okay, that's what it is. You know what? Curiosity is Google's at your fingertips. So when I go around, I don't just, I question everything and I love it. This is how you learn. I go by and I'll look at a truck that's going down the side of the road and I'll see something and I go, I wonder why. I wonder how that works. And I do. I Google it. So I might ask Siri, and I might find a website, click off my phone, and say do it. And then when I get to work, I can read the website. I'm not reading it while I drive, but it will remind me to do it. Or I might tell Siri to remind me to look something up because I don't want to forget. I want to know why. I want to know how does something, function. If I drive under a bridge, I'm not an engineer, but I question. I go, that's weird. They put these type of support beams on that bridge. I wonder why they use that kind of support beam. Again, I'm not an engineer, but by questioning it, I just learned something. Okay, because I looked it up. Right? And then, again, highlighting or taking notes as you go is very important. Right? Turning something into your own words. Make it make sense to you. Doesn't make sense to anybody else. And the textbook was not written for you. It was written for a large audience. So you have to take that and you have to translate it to something that you can understand that makes sense of you. Again, as I said earlier, I don't care how obscene it is. I don't care how inappropriate it is. I don't care if it's, make it a tie to something that you think is funny, right? And if it makes you laugh, it only has to make sense to you, right? But maybe you like cooking, and this makes you think of soup, right? I relate the artery and embalming to a penne noodle, right? Because you know what? How many of you have held an artery in your hand? I have. I've held many of them in my hand, okay? But in that classroom, when I describe it as a penne noodle, all of a sudden, every student goes, wow, okay, I can picture that. More than a penne noodle, more like a straight macaroni noodle, cooked macaroni noodle. Okay, a little bit more descriptive. So you have that. Now everyone's going to say, oh, yeah, I remember macaroni and cheese, and I can picture a cooked noodle, and I can roll that between my fingers, and that thin little thing, right? The walls don't collapse very easily. That's an artery. But you're able to remember something that you haven't felt yet, that you're learning from a textbook by describing something else. And hopefully you have faculty that can give you those kind of descriptions as well. That helps when they can do that. Again, reciting means also speaking out loud. Okay, giving things, describe things to other people, and your ability to describe something or explain something to somebody else goes a long way. All right, we have to learn things in multiple ways. You have to listen, we have to read, we have to speak, and we have to teach. And all of those kind of things work together, not independently. I mean, how many of you say, like, I'm an auditory learner, Eric, listen to it, I can understand it? How many of you say, I gotta see it to believe it? How many of you have to put it together, right? How many of you can look at the Lego manual and say, yep, that makes sense. How many of you have to go piece by piece by that Lego manual? You put the Legos together and then you're like, that made sense. Okay, now I got it. Now I can picture what I'm looking at. Right? How many of you need to see it be done versus looking at a textbook with a still image? Right? So these are all different things, but believe it or not, you need all of it. We may think we need one piece, but believe it or not, you need all of it because they're all different parts of your brain. So we're going to get into that. And then leaving yourself some time, to kind of review the material. And more than anything, as this last one says, pretend you're teaching the material to someone else. So go talk to the mirror. Go find a mirror and talk to it. Nowadays, go get your phone. Put your phone, okay, we all talk to our phones nowadays. Okay, put your phone up, record yourself. I'm sure many of you can talk to an empty room with nobody in it. I do it very well. Okay. But honestly, talk, walk around a room, go find your bedroom, go find your office, go just pace around an empty space apart, go find something and, talk to yourself, okay, or record yourself and just give yourself a lecture and then watch back to that lecture and see how well you did or see what you did, right? Because you're like, did I describe that well? Look it up. But more than anything, go talk to other people because other people will ask you questions. Spouses, children, parents, whatever you have, friends, and just say, can I can I explain? I'm learning this chapter today. Can I explain to you what I learned today in lecture? Yeah, you're good, because good friends will let you do that. So now you do that, or you're in the car ride. Doesn't matter if you're the driver or the passenger. And there's two ways to do this. One, you just say, can I just, we have an hour drive. Yeah, we're going up the Berkshires. We have a 3-hour drive. Can I give you, can I teach you everything that I've learned this semester? Yeah, that'd be cool. Your passenger has to sit through this. And you basically teach them. Because when you described something, all of a sudden you're like, I didn't know I knew that. I did not get that. Like all of a sudden, when I had to explain it to somebody, all of a sudden it made sense, right? But have them ask you questions. That's the best thing, because have them interrupt you and just say, wait a minute, did you just say that the artery feels like a cooked macaroni noodle? Yeah. Well, if that's the artery, what does a vein feel like? Oh, a vein feels like 2 pieces of saran wrap wrapped together when you roll it. Collapses. Oh, what about a nerve? I've always wondered what a nerve felt like. Oh, a nerve? That feels like a electrical cable when you roll it. It doesn't collapse, it's hard. Oh, cool. Right? So, but what you did was you took that knowledge that you learned and you just were able to regurgitate that. But what you did was, because somebody asked you a question and it wasn't like, what's the answer to this? And you're like, you weren't trying to think about it as a question on a test. This wasn't multiple choice. You were taking it and you were just having a conversation. And you were describing something in your own words, not the answer to the test words, just your own words, which later on, when you're doing the test, makes so much more sense, because all of a sudden you're able to take your words and you're able to make sense of what those are, because they're one of the answers. Okay. So again, cramming is not the answer. We're going to integrate things, break up our study time. We're going to do the best we can to do that. So there's actually high scoring test takers. Okay, there's people that are just really good at taking tests. So I looked at these people and they said, what do these people have in common? Now, again, from these study slides, again, I put together the first and last part. My father, I'll give you a little bit of background as where the centerpiece came and where a lot of this were built upon this. But in the 90s, he was he was tasked to put together the study review, the board review course for emergency physicians. He's a retired emergency physician at this time. But in the 90s, he was practicing and he put together a review course. So people would fly all over the country to a single conference center, and he'd have the expert in emergency pediatrics, orthopedics, whatever, okay, speak all the different sections, because emergency physicians have to take or physicians in general, have to take their board exam again every 10 years. And it's a very strenuous exam. It's a 2-part exam, practical and written. So when he was doing this during the lunch, at one point, one of the physicians came up and said, Dr. Shea, I think you should put together something on how to take exams. And he looks and he goes, how to take exams? He goes, we're a room full of emergency physicians. We've spent our entire career taking high risk, high stakes exams. What do you? So he's like, I'll look into it. So sure enough, he looked it up. And again, this is the mid-90s. He looks it up, and this is before electronics and all of that. Think about that. So he looks this up and he goes, wow, there's actually stuff on this. There's stuff on how to be a good test taker and how high scoring test takers do things different than, the average person, and how they tend to score high in general. So my father, being naturally a high scoring test taker himself, didn't realize that he was doing these things already, but, obviously improved his skill set. So what he did was, going forward at that board review, he took the lunch hour to do that. He would, while everyone else was eating, he would present on test taking techniques to entertain them during the lunch hour. And that's where a lot of this came from. So one of these things is high scoring test takers tend to plan out their time. So they know how long it's going to take them per question. Now, I'll tell you the average if you're taking, and not every professor follows this, but the average is if you were to take this national average, if you were to take an exam in the classroom, where you're on paper or computer, whatever it is, but you're in the classroom, and you have the professor walking the floor and proctoring you live, then you usually get a minute per question. So 15 minutes means 15 questions. Okay. That would be the standard. Versus if you're online, if you're taking this proctored remotely, or just online in general without proctoring, its typical standard is 45 seconds per question. And the reason that is there is because that limits cheating, because when you're in your own environment, obviously the chance of you cheating is much higher. So makes things a little bit quicker, which also means that you have less time to try to look things up if you did have cheating materials around you. Makes it harder for you to cheat. So that's where that comes in. Now, but when you're dealing with licensure exams and things like that, it could be a variety of whatever the time is. And they base it typically off of that. You usually get, 2-3 hours for like 129 questions, 200 something questions, usually on these high, these exams. Your final exams are usually scheduled from, around 100 questions for like 3 hours, usually, in college, things like that. So what you're doing is you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, I have 100, let me see, my final exam is 3 hours. So I have 100 questions and I have 3 hours. That is what, 180 minutes? So that 180, I have 180 minutes to do 100 questions. I'm going to divide those 100 questions over that 180 minutes. And more than anything, give myself a buffer, because obviously some questions take longer than others. Now, if you know that there's like a math question that's going to come up, or there's a question where you're going to have to write an essay, and you already know that those are coming up, obviously, you're going to want to make sure you budget a lot more time for those questions. So let's say I had 180 minutes to do 100 questions. I could do each. You really shouldn't take more than like 30 seconds really to do a question. I'm going to be honest. You either know the answer or you don't in most cases. So the average should be about 30 seconds to answer a question, if not less. If you know the answer it, move on. Because when you do that, don't go, I have a whole minute. What happens if you can answer the question and move on, then that means that that's more time towards other questions. Because when you get to that math question where you need to do the problem out, whether you're good at math or not, you have to do the problem out. That does take a little more time. Or the essay question where you have to write things out. Or, you get those complex questions, you're like, oh, you're budgeting the extra time. So even if it's 180 minutes, I still divide that by the 100 minutes. And I still give myself the thing that gave me 80 minutes, in order as a buffer. All right, so on this case, again, you're checking your progress, you're adjusting your pace as needed, so you're speeding up and slowing down as you needed. Again, electronically, most things have timers in the corner. I know that stresses the hell out of everybody, but it's there for a reason, so you know where you are. It knows where you are, you're on pace, you know that you're moving at a steady pace. You give yourself a deadline. You look and say, look, I got less than a minute per question. If you see that thing start going down a minute from where you started the question and you're starting to get close to that minute, you answer the question, you move on. Because if you haven't answered that question in about 30 seconds, you probably don't know the answer. And then again, unless it's like a math question or something that's taking more time. Most cases, you're sitting there stressing yourself out to the point that you're overthinking it. You're over-evaluating the question. So better off looking and saying, okay, do I know the answer? Let me think about this question. Okay, this has got to be the answer, right? But don't overthink it, but think critically on it before you move on, right? But at that point, if you were to run out of time at the end because you spent all your time giving yourself really thinking about this question, really thinking about it, then you run out of time at the end, or now you're rushing at the end. And we see a lot of that, right? You get halfway through and you're like, oh my goodness, the timer's moving. And now you're moving through the questions that you could have gotten some of those right if you had stayed on pace for the first questions, right? So that's very important. All right. Read every word of the question and read every possible answer. Okay. Read the question, read every word of that question, because what's going to happen is you're going to miss key words. And that's usually what I see a lot of in the class. Usually I'll review with students after, and, we'll look at the, if student wants to see their quiz, and they're looking at that. Most of the time it's because they missed a key word. They missed a word that differentiated. Yes, the answer they had was probably sounded legit, but, and there's always a but, that but is that the difference between that answer and this one was the word that they didn't read correctly. That was a differentiating factor, because obviously all of your answers are going to be close enough that they're in the same category enough that they're obviously based off of, they're based off of the fact that you're probably going to choose them, right? They were put there for a reason. So, so obviously read every word and then read every possible answer, and then you eliminate from there. Now, again, most cases he puts, again, my father's good for putting photos up here, but there's a reason they put the sign, because somebody did it. Okay, so if we say that, to do something, or when it comes to a question, you're like, oh, I'll never do that. Somebody did it. Somebody did it. Somebody does it all the time, and it's frequent. And I'll tell you, the majority of the questions that people get wrong, I can look on back of work to rear. I can see cross-out marks when things are on paper. And I'll tell you, the majority of times is because people second guess themselves. I have, in my 24 years of teaching, I can tell you that I very rarely have ever seen anybody turn an incorrect answer to a correct answer when they went back and reviewed their quiz or their exam. I can tell you almost every time, most of the time, that someone's changed an answer. They've changed a wrong answer to another wrong answer, or they changed the correct answer to the wrong answer because they second guessed themselves. So trust your gut. Okay, trust your gut. I can't say that enough. Trust your gut with what you're doing, and just try to really think it through the first time. Don't try to second guess yourself or go back if you don't have to. All right, so here's the key words that are vital to answering the question. These are absolutes, right? Always, never, except, okay? Frequently, all of these things. So if it says, dogs always eat what? The answers could be kibble, food, T-bone steak, okay, dirt. Well, obviously dogs all eat food, right? Always eat food. But if you put kibble, you're right, but do all dogs eat kibble? No, some dogs just eat wet food. Some dogs just eat kibble. Some dogs eat a combination of it. If your ranger down here, he gets whatever the cafeteria is serving that day because I bring it down to my office. So but the answer was, what do they always do? And the same thing, you have to think about it through. And obviously that's a simple one. But when you're thinking that through for academic questions, that can get a little bit more complicated, because now you have to think and say, what do they always do, right? So again, in my classes, so let's say we're dealing with something with religions. And you say, which of these religions always cremates? And here we have 4 religions. Well, here's the case. Some of those sometimes cremate, some of those never cremate, and one of those always cremates, right? Almost cremates the deceased. So in that case, it differs, but you have to go, well, I know this one cremates. Yeah, they do, but they don't always. Okay, there's cases where they don't do that. Or which cases do you always embalm? Well, that word always means that, that means there's no out, there's thing. Or the same thing with never. Which of these do you never do? Well, you may sometimes do that. No. That the question asked never. It's very specifically said, what do these never do? So don't get caught up, right? Or what do you do? Will you have except, all of these except one of these. Okay, so all of these are correct except, or which of these do we not do? So when you're answering a question that has something like that, then we want to read the question and say, okay, I would do 3 out of 4 of these. Then the one that I wouldn't do, though, I don't think about it as what do I do? I'm sorry, what do I not do? Because you have to think, your brain can't process that. Your brain processes what you can do. So therefore, I think about all the things I'm going to do, and then I answer the one that I didn't answer. Is the answer, okay? Things like that. Right. And then read every possible answer, because if there is an all of the above or none of the above, again, if it is all the above, that means that none of those can be possibly remotely incorrect, because it means that they all have to be correct. If it's none of the above, none of them can be possibly correct, because therefore it probably is the correct answer, and it's probably not the none of the above. So just think that, when we're doing those. All right. So again, good test takers will answer some of the easier questions first. Now, keep this in mind, that some exams are weighted according to the difficulty of the exam. Licensure exams tend to be that way. So if you have an easier question, that question is probably weighed lower than the difficult questions. The difficult questions have a higher weight. They're harder. So what's going to happen is if you were to answer only the easy questions, now that may be on your final exam, you may be able to do that, but on licensure exams and things like that, when you were to answer those, if you were to answer only the easy questions, they're not weighted as high. Versus, so if you missed all the harder questions, you're going to miss a lot of points. So just keep that in mind. But do move your way through, and especially with electronic exams now, it's harder to go back. You can't flip through and just try to check all your answers on paper like we used to. Again, if you're getting paper, it's a little easier to do that, where you can go back and forth. But the key thing is don't miss an answer, okay? Keep yourself moving in the same direction. Keep yourself answering those questions as you go along, because if you miss one and you forget to go back to it or you run out of time, that is incorrect. So you're better off at least putting an answer down. And yes, if you had to go back, you could go back, but at least you had something. You gave yourself at least a 25% chance, if not higher, of getting that correct. If you used your gut feelings and you moved it, you have a 50 or 75% chance of getting it right. That's much better than a 0% chance. Again, there is no trick questions, okay? Nobody's putting trick questions on their exams. You might have some fun on a quiz or something that a professor did something, but on licensure exams, on high-end stake exams, there's no trick questions, okay? That would just be mean. There's nothing. So you're looking for their legit answers, okay? They're put there for a reason. And if you do have questions, obviously bring them to your professor, or in the case of licensure exams, they usually have a comment area where you can say, and I've done this, your question sucks. Okay, let me explain your question to you. Okay, but when you're going to do that, make sure that you know the correct answer, and make sure that you know that that you're in the right on that before you make yourself look like a fool. But I can tell you that when students that come up to the podium and say, Professor Shea, there's something wrong with this question, they're usually right. There is something wrong with it, because the student that has the confidence to understand the question, they know the knowledge to understand the question is the person that's going to say, there's a problem with this question, because they know they're right, and they usually are. The student that just takes it for, the student that doesn't know the information is usually one that takes it for granted and says, oh, I must not understand it enough, so the question's probably correct. And they don't bring it to your attention because they just assume that they don't know enough of it to recognize that there was a problem with the question. So keep that in mind. Again, eliminating distractors. So if the question contains any unrelated information, it's probably not the correct answer, right? It was put in as a distractor. Think about what that question is specifically asking. Now, the answer may sound like something that you studied related to the topics in the question, but it may not be what that question is specifically asking. So keep that in mind. But what you're going to do is you're going to eliminate all of those things that are not specific to that question. Be careful, obviously, don't second guess yourself, but eliminate those items. And then you're looking at less things to debate between as to what could be the correct answer. Now, other questions as you go along could give you answers. So if you're going along, you may notice something another question that told you something that may have kind of led to you realizing what the answer might have been. So that does help you as well. Okay. Never change your answers on a hunch. Never change your answers unless you absolutely, positively, without a doubt, know that the correct answer was one of the other ones. Okay. Most likely your first answer is going to be correct. You used your gut, used all of the techniques that I'm going through right now, and you ensured that you made the best guess that you could have on that exam. Okay. Going beyond that, you're second guessing yourself. But if you get to a future question, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that was it. Rhinitis. Oh, that's right. Because one question says, rhinitis is inflammation of the what? And all of a sudden, a couple questions later, 100 questions later, all of a sudden you get a question that says during rhinitis, the nose is, suffering from, what type of infection, bacterial, viral, whatever. Oh, that's right. Rhinitis meant nose. Rhino has their horn on the nose. That's right. I remember that Professor Shea told me rhino has a horn on the nose, and rhinitis means nose or inflammation on the nose. So then you can go back and you can change it because you got the answer, and that might have helped you. Again, never leave a question blank. If you leave it blank, it's automatically wrong, and there is no penalty for guessing. So again, gives you a 25% chance that you may have had it right. All right, so I'll give you a couple examples of what we're doing here too. Looking for similarities. So things that are synonymous, things that are alike. When something is synonymous, when it's alike, therefore, it can't necessarily be, they can't both be the right answer, right? Because if one would be the right answer, they're both the correct answer. But in this case, so now we're looking at words or phrases that may look or sound alike. We have to be very careful with some of those, right? Because we have, the medical term for nerve, muscle, do sound pretty much alike. So those are easy to mix up on an exam. So be careful of those, right? What's the prefix or the suffix on that? And does that relate to the question? Is that a giveaway? Because sometimes the prefix or the suffix may lead you down the tunnel to realizing what we may be looking towards, right? They may lead down a avenue where it eliminates some of those items because those prefixes or suffixes, they can't. So let's say itis. Itis means inflammation of. So if I'm talking about a surgery, ectomy, okay? All right, two of these have the suffix ectomy in them, and two of them have itis. Well, itis I know means inflammation. I can't remember what the heck ectomy meant, but I remember itis meant inflammation, so that probably doesn't mean surgery. So ectomy might mean something about surgery. So even though I didn't remember that, I did eliminate the suffix that I did remember did not relate to surgery. So that might help as well. And then, again, any type of phrase that may give things away may be a part of that as well. All right, so in that, here's your examples. Nasopharyngeal intubation involves. Let me think. Oh, this has got to be nasopharyngeal. Nasal. I see C says nasal in it. Oh, nasopharyngeal. Well, yeah, that looks pretty close to nasal. Nasal must be nasal. Right? So I go with C. Right? And that's going to give me, that's a giveaway, right? Nasal and naso. So even though I may have not studied all that well, I did pick out that word. All right, so that gave me the giveaway on that one, just based off of the phrase. So inflammation of the muscular wall of the uterus is referred to as, let me see. Myo means muscle. Metria, I can't remember what that means, but it means uterus, by the way. I can't remember, but itis means inflammation of. Oh, well, that sounds something. Endometriitis. Well, that has metria as well. That also means uterus. Endo. That means outside of. All right, cervical dysplasia. Oh, cervix, that's close to the uterus. All right, so we're going through these, but one of those stands out, right? Because the question specifically said inflammation. So I now know that two of those questions have the suffix that I'm looking for, right? Two of those have inflammation and itis. So by going with itis, I now know that I've eliminated it down to two of those. And then one of those has myo, which relates to muscular. But both of those have metri, meets uterus. So if two of those have inflammation of the uterus. One of those is the muscle of the uterus, which is the correct answer, A. B is inflammation of the lining of the uterus. So by piecing those together, I narrowed it down to two, and then I narrowed it down to one based off of the pieces that were in there. Okay, and that doesn't. And I'm using medical, and this is not medical, but now I'm using medical stuff to explain what prefixing suffixes. But you could do that for anything. Okay, again, whether it be engineering, art, criminal justice, whatever you're studying, you can break those words into legal terms or whatever it is. You can break them down and you can do the same thing in that relation. All right, does anybody know who served as the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II? Anybody have any guesses? Anybody, any history buffs in here? Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II. So we got Field Marshal Montgomery. I say we don't have pardon on there as an option. From the options we have. Anybody know? Eisenhower? Okay, let's go with Eisenhower. All right. Oops. So yeah, it was Eisenhower. So in that case, you're looking through and you're like, oh, I remember some of these names. But what you may be doing is in your mind, you're like, did I remember that? Douglas MacArthur. That name sounds familiar. Oh, I don't know. I don't remember the other two. I don't remember studying those two, but I think Eisenhower, that must have been it, right? So we're going with. All right. So with this, so now we're going down. Here's another question. So you got to question. So we went from question 16 to question 25. As the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe during World War II, General Eisenhower oversaw the planning of. So now we may have put MacArthur because we thought it was MacArthur or we thought it was Purton. And all of a sudden, now we got to a question like this and we're like, oh, that's right. Okay. So now you go back to question 16. But again, in this case, we now know for certain that this question gave us the answer to the prior question. All right. So by doing that, we now know we are going to give the right answer. I'm not second guessing myself. I'm not, because I was literally question 25 just gave me the answer to question 16. Very good. All right. So then we're dealing with questions that have all of the above. So again, they all have to be correct. If any of them are in doubt that they may be incorrect, then there may be only one correct answer, and it may be whichever one may be most correct. And be careful with those too, because a lot of times you may have a lot of things that sound correct, but there may be one that is more correct. All right, so be careful when you get to those. All right. So in this case, the following muscles are found in the thigh. So out of those, A and C are obviously correct. So if we have those, you may not remember what B is. The vastus lateralis, you're like, I don't remember studying that. What minor muscle was that, right? Where is that? Well, even though you don't remember it, you knew the quadriceps and you knew the hamstrings are correct. You know that 2 out of 3 of those options, because the fourth one is all of the above, but you know that 2 out of 3 of those were correct. Therefore, even though you didn't study and you don't remember vastus lateralis, it has to be the correct. It also has to be correct, because if it's not correct, then quadriceps and hamstrings, which you know are both in the thigh, are both of the correct. It has to be. So therefore, all the above. None of the above means that there's no shortcut. Again, none of them can be correct. All right. So now when we're computing things, we're dealing with math. And with this, you think you're deceived because you think you need to do more than you need to do. All right. Just use logical reason. I'm going to tell you a lot of the math that I know on my quizzes. Sometimes it's just straightforward. Here's the answer. And then there's other ones where it could take 3 steps to get there. You have to do, here's the question, but you have to do this problem, which was probably a question that was probably somewhere else in the quiz that you may have had to do that as a type of math. There was another thing that gave you answers that you had to do a different type of math. But for this one, because you have this information, you now need to do this to get this answer and then use that answer to get this answer. So the big thing of that is don't stop somewhere along the way. Oh, yeah, okay. It's not just one formula. Sometimes math doesn't mean just one formula. It doesn't mean just doing that. Don't forget, if there's multiple steps to get there, you may have to solve to get an answer that use that to solve for something else. That's normal. That we do that a lot. Just don't stop along the way, especially when you have multiple choice. Don't stop along the way and say, "Oh, I see the answer." Because you know what? The professor did that on purpose. Okay, the person that wrote the licensure exam did that on purpose because they knew you were going to do step 1 and stop and when you saw the answer, or do step 2 because that was the other option, because they saw that you were going to do that, or whatever the case may be, they know all of the things that you're going to do wrong if you did your math wrong, and they're going to put those as distractors, and then only one of those is going to be the correct answer. Okay, they didn't just come up with the distractions for no reason. They came up with the ones that you're more likely than not to mistakenly put. Now, the other thing with math, a lot of times if they're multiple choice, the nice thing is that you can get halfway through the math thing and you're like, all right, let me see. I can get to this point. I don't have to figure out the decimal points. If the answer is 106.68, well, obviously, if I'm starting to multiply and divide, and I go 106. Yeah, I don't really care because unless the answers are 106.68, 106.58, and I need that decimal, I don't need to go that far. I just need, on a multiple choice, I need to only get far enough to determine that I have the answer. What that's going to do is if you continue doing your math out, you're wasting your time because you just got the answer. It's multiple choice answer. If it's written out, you have to write it out. But if it's multiple choice, you put that answer in, move on to the next question. Okay? Don't try to finish what you're doing. Just get far enough to recognize which one of those 4 might be the answer. All right, so in this question, computing the area of a circle with a 90-degree quadrant of 15 square inches. Oh, geez. How do I manage that one? Computing the area of a circle with a 90-degree quadrant of 15 square inches. Well, it's simpler than it sounds. That's my circle. Okay. I have a circle with 90-degree quadrant. Quadrant means 4, 90 degrees. I broke this into 4 boxes. Okay. So therefore, if I have these 4 boxes, and each one of those boxes is 15 square inches, the area, which would be the square inches of the entire circle, would therefore be 15 square inches multiplied by how many boxes? There's 4 boxes. Okay, it was that simple. I didn't have to sit there and calculate some big long formula to do it. It was just 4 boxes, 90-degree quadrants, there's 4 quadrants. Quadrant means 4. All right. But when you read something like that, it sounds much more complicated than it is, to that point that we start doing more complicated math than we need to do. And we also waste our time. We don't get to the other questions. So answer the question. Just think for a second. What is this asking? multiply 15 times 4, that's 60. Move on to the next question. All right, can anybody tell me what the missing parking space number is? Anybody know what the missing parking space number is? Anybody? It's 87. All right. Exactly. All perception. It's all perception. So Joe got it. It's 87, right? So you're looking at the paper up right the wrong direction. We were looking at the parking spots upside down. 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91. Exactly. Okay. So when you're looking at something as the question, sometimes you may not be maybe physically looking at upside down, but sometimes you are. So sometimes you may be you may be picturing something upside down. It's the perception of the question. And it may be the way how something gets worded that you're not thinking of all the variables, right? Because you read it in the textbook and you studied it this very specific way. But when you saw it out of context, all of a sudden you missed it. Or you studied something in relation. I'm going to pick on anatomy again. So you studied the entire body, right? With all these labels. You Googled image and you're looking at all the arteries and all the veins and all of these beautiful things in the body. And how did you study? The brachial artery is above the ulnar and the radial, and it's right below the axillary, boom, boom, boom. And what you're doing is you didn't realize, but you just studied the labels in the orders of 1, 2, 3 going down the board, down the piece of paper on the left side. Then you studied the veins on the right side of that. And what you did was you studied things in the order they were. So now I get to take, so you have to be careful with this, because don't study with things that can change. You have to study things, because if I were to take, all of a sudden, I'm in anatomical position, right? Anatomical position. And you studied the radius, the radial bone and the ulnar bone, or the radial artery and the ulnar artery. And all of a sudden, the person's like this. But now on the quiz, I got a person pointing at you like that. And I got arrows coming from the person. I'm going to ask you, which one's the radius and the ulna? Crap. I don't know, because I studied an image that was like this. And somehow you didn't really study the image. You studied those things in order. You were using your study technique to say axillary, brachial thing. And guess what? Those other items weren't lines there on the quiz because they didn't ask those items. Or you studied in relation to other things that they're not labeled. It was just asking you just one question. Which bone is this? And you have to know that that's the radius. So what you want to do is study things in ways that don't change. So give a little study anatomy here. Here's my anatomical position, right? I don't study the things in labels. What I did was I studied and say, okay, on my own self, I'm going to paint this in a little body paint, a little marker, or I get my family, my friends, and said, can I draw on you? Get their permission. And now I say, okay, in relation to something else, the radius is on the thumb side of the hand. And I remember that because the radius has an R, it's an R, wide flailing bottom, which means that the bone also is wider on the bottom when the anatomical position. Therefore, it's closer to the bigger finger, the thumb. Versus the ulnar, it's a U shape, thinner on the bottom. Therefore, the bone is also thinner on the bottom and is closer to the smallest finger, the pinky. I don't care what direction my body goes in, those bones did not change. Okay, they were not in relation to the chart on Google. They were in relation to the human body, and they didn't change. I remembered things in relation to where they really are. So that's the key thing you have to keep in mind as well. Or whether again you're remembering steps of something, engineering, criminal justice, art, whatever you're studying, it's the same thing. Trying to remember things in conceptual order or in actual relational order, but not in necessarily trying to remember one picture, because I guarantee you that's not the picture about to get in the quiz. Okay. All right. So then we have complex questions. These are the ones that give you these things on the top, right? A, B, C, and D, and you're looking going, oh boy, right? 1, 2, and 5, or we have things in order. So one, yes, these things will give you a headache. But what we have to think about is what, especially if things are in order, what comes first, one comes second. So what we're going to go down, and I'm going to look at these answers, and I'm going to figure out, do I have to read all of the options above, right? I obviously have 5 options, so I have 5 things to read above. Do I have to read all of them? Not yet. I do know that these answers are narrowing it down for me. So I know one of the options is 1, 2, and 5. One is 2 only. One is 3 and 5. One is 1, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so let's see. Is 1 a possible answer? I got 2 of those. So let's see if 1, I'll look up there. All right, 1 is a possible answer. Okay. So now if 1 is one of the answers, I now don't even have to distract myself with B or C. So now I need to figure out, I know that 5 is in both of those. So now I'm just going to, for my own sanity, verify and look up and say, is 5 one of those? Because if I look up and I say 5 is not one of those, definitely not one of those options, then I know that that 1 wasn't either, right? Or, you know, I know that if 5 is not, then the only option that doesn't have 5 in it's got B. So, you know, maybe that was a quicker way of doing that, because 3 out of 4 of these have 5 in them. So if I look at 5, I now know that if 5 is not the answer, it's easily B is the only answer. So I can narrow things down, but I'm only using the answers to do that. I'm not trying to read each one and saying, okay, well, is this one, and then trying to find the answers that go with it, because I'm confusing myself. Narrow it down. Okay. So 5 was an option. Yes. Okay. 5 is definitely an option for this. Okay. All right. Let me see. The difference between these was, you know, 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right. Let me see. Is 4 a viable option? Because that's going to narrow it down pretty quick, right? Because only one of those has 4 in it. So if I figure out is 4, nope, 4 is not a viable option. Okay. Let me see. It's, you know, now I have 3. So now basically I can narrow it down. If it's not 1, then I know it has to be C, whatever. So we just, again, do those things. Now, if you're doing something in order, the best thing to do is literally look at them in order. So it says, what is the order that you put your clothes on in the morning? All right. So the options, you know, or what do you do in the morning? Okay. And there's 21 steps of what you do in the morning. And they're all scrambled up there. And then you're looking at these different options. So what I'm going to do is I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking down A, B, C, and D. And when you look down, all I have to figure out is what the first thing I do is the last thing I do is. So if I'm going to look down, I say, okay, what are my options? So if my options for first are either 1, 2, or 3, that's pretty straightforward. 4 and 5 are not an option for number 1, so I'm going to have to look at them. All right, so just looking at 1, 2, and 3, and maybe I have 21 options here that I could do. But 1, 2, and 3, let me look down. All right. 1 is put on my pants. 2 is brush my teeth. 3 is put on my underwear. Well, what should I do first? All right, well, I'm not really sure if I'm a little confused. I don't know if I put my underwear on first or do I brush my teeth first? Yeah, that could depend on the person, right? Also didn't mention breakfast yet. All right, so now I got to figure out what am I going to do? Then I look and say, all right, what is the last option? The last option is 5. So again, this would be longer than 1, 2, and whatever. So let's say the last option is 5. Last option of 5 says eat breakfast. All right. Well, I have a couple of those that say 5 on them. So I now know I've narrowed it down to a couple options, but I'm not sure if I brush my teeth or put my underwear on first. But I've narrowed it down that I can't put my pants on because underwear comes before pants. Okay, brushing teeth could go either way, but putting my underwear on does have to come before my pants. So I have to do that. And then eating breakfast, I guess I could do that naked too, but in the sequence of things, maybe I do that closed. So so now I debate, okay, narrow those down. Now, because I have multiple things that may be first or last, right? So maybe I have multiple eating a breakfast, and I have a couple that say, taking a shower or something. That would be the first thing I do before, doing those other things. So, a couple things that say that. Now what I'm going to narrow it down is, okay, now I go in by one. I don't need to read everything and try to make sure everything's in order. What I need to do is just go in by one. So I go in. Now the second line says, so for the first one I determined, all right, taking a shower should probably be first. And I figured out now 3 out of those say shower. Last thing was eat breakfast. All right, I'm going to go in. All right, out of only those 3 that had shower, I'm not worried about the other ones. Now I'm going to look at those and say, okay, what are the differences? Well, 2 of those say, the next step would be to put on my underwear. One of those says wipe up with a towel. All right. Well, guess what? I don't have to go much further because I'm pretty sure wiping up with a towel comes before putting my underwear on. So therefore, I did not have to read 21 steps. And you just wasted a lot of time if you read 21 steps. All I read was shower, eat. Okay. Go in by one. I only had wipe up a towel, and the other 2 said, one says put pants on, one says put underwear on. Wipe up a towel. Done. I don't have to read the rest of them. Check it off. Move on. Okay. But where we give ourselves a headache is that we spend a lot of time reading the entirety of this. Okay. So same thing. So this is what I was just referencing. I didn't realize this next slide. So this is the same thing. So what would you do in the order? So again, control bleeding, put on gown and gloves, send the patient to the OR, secure that airway, start a blood transfusion. So in this case, we have, our first options were 5, 2, 4, and 2. Okay. So 5 is start a blood transfusion, 4 is secure the airway, and 2 is gown and glove. All right. So I'm probably going to have to gown and glove before, right? Put your PPE on before you do anything. So now I've narrowed it down to B and D. That was quick. All right. My last options are 4 and 3. So 4 is secure the airway. 3 is send the patient to the OR. Oh, I should probably have an airway secured before I send them anywhere. Done. Right? It's B. I did not have to read. I don't care what the middle 3 were. I have not a clue what the middle were. I don't need to read them. It doesn't matter because all I know is I gowned and gloved, and the last thing I do is, sorry, read that wrong. Yeah. So send in, what did I narrow it down to? Send it into the OR or secure the airway. So I said that backwards, actually, it would be D. So my apologies. So obviously sending the person to the OR is the last step I'm going to do. Done, D, right? I don't need to worry about all the things I do between. I know what they are, but I don't need to worry about them for the question because all I needed to do was first and last. Now, if more than one thing had person go in the OR, then I would just move in by one this way. And then if there was more than one that had that, then I'd move in one by that way until I work my way towards the center from first and last. All right. So that shows what we're looking at as far as the first and last steps, which tell you pretty quick which one it is. All right. So then we have things that are similar choices. So in this case, they both can't be correct, right? So in this case, we have when a family provides you with all the pertinent materials for their loved one services, it makes your job more, well, complex, difficult, pleasant, or intricate. Well, complex, difficult, and intricate are all the same. Right? So it has to be pleasant because if it was complex, it can't also be difficult. And if it was difficult, it can't also be complex. So we would have to keep that in mind, right? All right. So judgment questions can be very difficult. In this way, it makes you have to think like the test writer in this case. So what would the experts agree on? I don't care what you think. Nobody cares what you think. They do, but nobody really cares what you think. Okay. All they care about is with the experts. Okay. So your opinion, your own view on the matter doesn't matter. Okay. So we're going to do a legal case. And in that legal case, you can't think about, well, I believe that people that commit this kind of crime really didn't mean it and that they should get off. Yeah, we may all agree with you, but what does the judge think? Okay, if we were to go before the judge, what would the judge's ruling be? Because this is a legal matter, which means that we're going by the book on that legal matter. Okay, what your opinion is may mean a lot, but it doesn't mean anything to the correct answer on your legal exam. Okay, so we have to go with what do the experts agree on? Medical, dental, engineering, whatever, right? You may think that the support beam can go here, but what do the experts say? All right. So, but it could be a judge. Well, when we're dealing with judgment, those are difficult because again, we do get a lot of opinions with that, especially with like law or ethics and things like that. All right. Again, when you're doing essays or reports, answer the question that's asked. Don't just answer just the question, and say, all right, this is very short. Give them the information that they're looking for because they may be looking for some of that detail, and that could be important, but answer the question that is asked. All right, so now we're at the finish line of that exam, right? What do we do? So while we're finishing up, again, if you had any questions that you had to go back to, you can go back. But at this point, what's going to happen is, how do we know which questions to go back to? Do you remember which ones they were? Or you're going to look at the whole thing and second guess yourself? And at that end, especially some of these electronic exams, especially licensure exams, they have next buttons and they have previous buttons. To go back is not that easy. It's really not. So you get to the very end of a licensure exam and you got this big grid that has all these numbers on it. And all of a sudden you need to click the number and you need to know exactly where you're going. You may be able to flag it, but how many did you, it's like you're highlighting, right? How many of you over highlighted? How many of you are flagged? So the same thing with this, we need to know exactly. So I usually take a piece of paper. If you're in a licensure exam, they will give you something like a laminated piece of paper. And you write down the numbers and you're like, all right, I questioned 1, I questioned 16, I questioned 25. Now you get to the end. If you were just like, yeah, I just need to kind of get my psyche that I questioned this and I want to write a number down, that's fine. But if you really questioned it and you said, I think this is 1, maybe it was math and you're like, I did the math, but I want to go back and redo the math to double check. Or maybe this was an essay question. Maybe you want to go back and you want to elaborate a little bit more now if you have time at the end. Or maybe this was a question where you're like, yeah, I put this down, but I was debating between these and I may find the answer later on. If I don't find the answer later on in another question, then I should not go back. What I do is I circle those so then I can go back and I can look at those. And if I look at them and say, nope, I don't have any more of an answer now than I had before, don't change your answer. Don't. But if you do absolutely have a better answer now, and you know for certain you're giving the right answer and you're not second guessing yourself, that's going to change. But again, by circling it, you've narrowed down those. So you're eliminating yourself from second guessing yourself on that. Okay. Again, never change an answer unless you're 110% sure that it is the correct. Again, aim high. You need a good attitude when you're going into exams. Always aim higher than you think. Again, don't just go, oh, students always say, oh, well, what do I need to pass the final? Is it 100? Really? Well, all right, maybe a 98. But but you still need to get high, right? Why are you aiming any less than 100? Right? We don't want to aim any less than that. All right. And that's the baby ranger that's been running around the room. All right. So going on, I'm going to talk about studying now. So with studying, how many of you study the night before and you just study for as long as you possibly can? How many of you really cram and try to study for as long as you possibly can? Yeah. So based off of this chart that you can see here, so I kind of graphed out, and this is not actual data. What I do is, so this is based off of, what you normally get out of this 3 or 4 days before. Okay. So what we find is that if you're studying and you're like, I'm going to just focus, right? I'm in study mode. This is my time to study. And we all have those moments, right? We have a lot going on in our lives. But hour 1, here you are, here's your energy levels. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And then you kind of start going down, your energy is going down. You may not realize it, but your energy is going down. Your retention is also going down. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got a second wind, right? Maybe you got up and you went to the bathroom and that gave you a little bit of a second wind or whatever the case may be. And you get a little bit and you build that. But for the most part, your energy and your retention is decreasing over that time from binge studying. Versus if you take longer breaks, you do get your energy back. But you're only getting material during those times that you're studying too. So keep that in mind. But you have these longer breaks, which are giving yourself that. Whereas shorter breaks, you're keeping, for the most part, you're keeping consistent energy. But you're keeping that, but you're getting retention. But you're still not retaining everything you can unless you integrate. All right. So now the question means, what do I mean by integrating your studying? Now, to integrate your studying means to make it part of your life. And that's what I put along the bottom here. That means instead of binge studying where you're like, all right, here's the book. Read. Okay, take a break. Read. Take a break, right? What you're doing is you're really not retaining that. So in that case, what you're doing by integrating that is making it a part of your life. And part of that is I use Post-it notes, index cards, Post-it notes. I use apps on my phone. I do whatever I can, but I make it part of my life. So I have Post-it notes. When I'm studying for something, I got Post-it notes stuck all over the house. I got them to the door frame of my bedroom. I got them stuck to the microwave. I got them stuck to the oven. I got them stuck to the dishwasher. I got them stuck to my dashboard of my car. I got them everywhere. Okay, the washer, dryer, everywhere. Okay, my living room. So what you're doing is, I mentioned earlier, rewarding yourself. Well, this plays in as well. So make rules for yourself. The same way that I do not have time to go to the gym. I've tried. I was on the weight team in high school. I don't look like it. I am now, but I was. And I make rules for myself. I don't have time to exercise or anything like that. I have a busy life. So what I do is I put something like a pull-up bar in my the door frame to my bedroom. So now I can make rules for myself. Do the same thing with studying. But let's say in this rule, now I say every time I go through the bedroom door, I have to do as many pull-ups as I can. Now I go in, I get changed, I do whatever. Okay, I leave the room. I have to do as many pull-ups as I can. Now, I go about my day. If I come back in, I'm not allowed to go through that bedroom door. I have to do as many pull-ups as I can. What I'm doing is I'm making myself a routine, right? I'm making a rule. And that rule is saying every time I have to go through that bedroom door, I have to do this. Pretty straightforward. But the same thing goes for studying. Every time you walk through the door frame, you have to take a Post-it note off. So instead of getting things in this intense binged moment, what you're doing is you're taking things in very small bits and pieces. And what you're doing is you're taking that knowledge and you're sitting on it for 15 minutes, 5 to 10, 15 minutes. So now what I do is I take that and I read it and I go, okay, that instrument, what is that instrument? So I stick it over here and I just think about it for a minute, right? So now I'm thinking about that, all right, what was that instrument? Well, I think that instrument is this and this. Look at the back of the poster. That was right. That was what it was. And I stick it onto something else. So now the entire time I'm walking around my bedroom, maybe I'm folding clothes, maybe I'm putting clothes away, maybe I'm making the bed, whatever the case may be, maybe I'm going to bed, okay? Whatever the case may be, I'm now spending my time just thinking about one thing. That's all I'm doing. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not reading through the text. I'm just thinking about one thing. Because what I'm doing is I'm not just memorizing. That's the key thing, is I'm not just memorizing that as the answer. I'm not saying this instrument does this, move on, and I now think about the next instrument. What I'm thinking about is I'm committing just that instrument or just that process. I'm committing that to my memory because I'm not just thinking about that, but I'm like, I wonder how else I could use that instrument. I wonder if they have instruments that do this. Let me Google it. Oh, I wonder if I could do this with a patient. I wonder if I could do this with a decedent. I wonder if the bridge could be built this way. Or I wonder if I wrote a poem that way or drew the picture this way. Whatever the case may be, whatever your major is, you're just thinking about that concept and you're putting it into perspective. So that way, what you're doing is you're eventually committing it because it's actually part of your thought process. But you've also thought about everything that surrounds it, which is what helps you understand something, is not understanding facts, but understanding how it applies. So now I leave my bedroom and I grab another Post-it note. And while I'm walking around the hallway and doing something, and I get to the kitchen, I do the same thing. I'm thinking while I'm cooking, all I'm thinking about is another concept, whatever was on that Post-it note on the microwave, and I'm cooking, right? And maybe there's a point where I put a new Post-it note and I get another Post-it note. But again, I give myself about 10, 15 minutes to just focus on one thing. While I'm driving, same thing. So now in doing this, are my energy levels going down? No, because because I'm not hyper focusing on anything. I'm doing this in a very relaxed way. I'm letting my brain be relaxed while I'm thinking and while I'm studying, and I'm not just hyper focusing on a topic. The other way to do something like this would be to read something. So now I might read a paragraph of the textbook and then go about my day. Now I go and cook something, and all I'm thinking about is just that paragraph, not the rest of the chapter, just that paragraph. And then once I'm done, while I'm going to go eat my dinner, now maybe I read another paragraph just before the food gets taken off the stove. I read another paragraph, take it off, pour it in my bowl or put it on my plate. And now while I'm eating, all I'm thinking about is that paragraph that I just read. And again, you're committing it to your memory. You're just finding ways to let yourself daydream. I mean, we all daydream, right? But you're allowing yourself to daydream, but you're focusing your daydream on that topic. And you're only letting you think about that. Right. So these are just examples of different ways that you can do things. Now, the other thing, as I said, you have to put this into multiple ways, right? You have to read, you have to write, you have to listen to how to speak. You're like, how the hell do I have time for that, Dan? Where am I going to find time in my day to do all of that? Well, we're going to combine a few things. So one of those is when you're reading the chapter of your textbook, read it out loud. You could do that while you're taking notes. I take notes at the same time, but I'm recording myself while I'm reading the chapter. I'm reading it out loud. So I may sit there and read in silence. And then I read the whole chapter in silence. Then I go back and I read the chapter and I take notes. Now, while I'm taking notes, I might have pause on the recording. So I can take a few notes, record again. I read the next paragraph. I hit pause. I take my notes on that paragraph. But what now I have is a consistent recording of my own voice, but I have a recording of that. So now all of those times in my day that I cannot read or study, I still have something. You go to the gym while you're working out, you got your earpods in. While you're walking around and you're doing things, or while you're driving, you got that recording come through your dashboard. Those are all wasted moments in our day that you're otherwise sitting in silence or listening to songs, and that's good too. But those are all times that while you're trying to study, you can fill those voids of time. Instead of music, you're listening to yourself having read the textbook, which means that you're getting it in a different way. You're also now you've taken notes, you've written, you've spoken, you've read it, and you're listening. Those are different parts of your brain that are allowing you to get this material in different ways, right? And you're speaking, and speaking is a big piece of that. So now we take that material, and now, again, I mentioned this before, finding as many people as you can that can say, can I just teach you what I learned? Yeah, that'd be so cool, right? Or maybe you want to do some social media. Maybe you go on social media and you're like, let me tell the world what I learned today. And that's your thing. Maybe a little podcast, a little video, on social media. And you're like, today I learned this, whatever. But what you did was you taught somebody else. So again, you don't have to do it today in social media. You can just do this to a mirror in your room. You can talk to yourself, or talk to the dog, whatever you need to do. But by having people ask you questions and say, can you explain, that you said this, can you explain that? Then, can make sense. All right. Yes, you can do them all at the same time. So Joe says, am I saying to take notes out loud while reading? Or am I saying to read the whole chapter out loud and record it? So a combination of those, and everything works for things. But what I'm saying is kind of just read the whole chapter. You get a gist of the whole chapter. Just read it in silence, just kind of read through. So I pick a moment where maybe I I can't speak out loud. All right, I'm in a classroom, I'm gonna read the whole chapter. So I just read, you know, I don't stop. I just keep reading as quickly as I can, and that's fine if I didn't get it all, that's fine. I'm just gonna kind of keep reading and keep moving forward to the entire chapter as quickly as I can. Then now I go back when I'm in a place where I can speak. Your phone just has a recorder on it, which is amazing. Use that again, but any type of recorder is fine. I put the recorder next to me. I put my phone next to me, and now I read the paragraph out loud. The recorder's recording me while I read that. Then I pause the record. Pause the record aspect, and I take notes on what I just did. So now I read the paragraph. Now I go and I write the bold words. I wrote, you know, I take some notes from the textbook. I hit record again. I read the next paragraph. So when you listen to it, you're listening to one consistent recording. You're not listening to big breaks in time. But the but what you're doing is you read it, so you're silently just reading without trying to speak at the same time. Then another time where you're reading it and you're speaking it, that helps you use a different part of your brain, because when you speak out loud, when you read and speak out loud, you use a different part of your brain. So what you're doing is you're using one part of your brain by reading silently, a different part of your brain by reading out loud, and you're using then you're note taking. You're using, rather than doing everything, you know, multiple times, you're pausing that so you can take your notes at the same time. You're doing that. But then you're using that recording through the rest of your semester, the rest of your time, your academic career. You're now able to go back, and that recording doesn't go anywhere. You now have that recording. That's your own voice. It's your own textbook. And, you know, you just keep listening to this. So now as you're driving to your car, if you read the textbook and now all of a sudden, because you're listening to recordings, it's going to go back to chapter 1, and you start listening to chapter 1, you keep going through, you know, and you refresh your memory on what chapter 1 had, and then you know, eventually you're listening to, you know, start the new chapters, and, you know, you eventually go back and you're starting to listen to earlier chapters again, and, you know, things like that. So you don't lose that. That's the nice thing about recording, is you don't lose those recordings. You can just, as you're driving or in the gym, you can just keep listening back to old ones, which help you not forget the old knowledge. The other way to kind of speed things up too is, if you don't have time to read out loud, and that's fine, you read the chapter, or maybe you want something to read, you want to have something speaking while you're reading. Speechify, it does cost money. There is the free version. You can find things like articles online, or books you can download, or websites and things like that, and it will read. I mean, it's not the premium voices. It's free. You get voices. They read them like anything else. If you pay for the premium version of that, the subscription version, obviously it costs some money. But the nice thing about that is that you can take pictures of your textbook. So what you can do is, you could actually, this QR code brings you right to the app download. If you're interested, I made that a little easier for you to find what I was talking about. But you could take, and I do this, I did get the paid version of this, of Speechify, to see if I liked it. I kind of did the trial, and I did like it. So I could actually take a textbook, and I'll do this every so often in my office. I'll just kind of refresh my memory on old textbooks that I have in there, see if I can remember some of the stuff. And I'll do this while I drive. But what you can do is you can scan a page or two at a time. It will scan both pages, and it will turn them into individual pages. And it doesn't take up that much memory on your phone, because it converts it to a black and white, very grainy. It can read it, because it's converting it to a digital form that it can understand. But it's not saving it as the colored page that you're looking at. And what it will do is, you can hit play, and it will actually read your book to you, which is really nice. And you could do that. Well, I'll do that. I'll take pictures before I leave my office. Sometimes I'll just go find a random book. I'm interested in this book, and I'll take pictures of a chapter of the book. And then while I drive, I'll do that. If I'm like a week from today, I have to drive up to Maine for to the State House up in Maine for something for work. So what I'm going to do is, Tuesday before I go, I'm going to take a bunch of pictures of things. I got a 3-hour drive up, 3-hour drive back. And I'm going to take pictures of a couple of books in my office. And then while I drive, this thing's through my dashboard going to be reading my various textbooks to me, just so I can learn something that I didn't have time. It will read pretty much your entire textbook. What I would do is, I did try to scan an entire textbook, and it did freeze up on me, like 600 pages. So I learned that I usually can get like 2 or 3 chapters, depending on the length of the chapter. I can usually get 2 or 3 chapters scanned in. But if you're doing 1 chapter at a time, you can do that, and it will read the next chapter to you. You won't have any problems with it freezing up. It can do entire half of books, no problem. For that. But again, it does cost something for the subscription version, but it does read it for you. The nice thing with that is almost like a sing along, like you did as a kid. You could, if you were sitting at your desk, you could hit play and you could be listening to this thing read, and then you're reading the words in the textbook while it's speaking them, which is also nice if you want to kind of like read, but have someone else reading that book to you while you're reading. If you have, again, a lot of us have learning disabilities and things like that, where we're, again, you're trying to read and you get distracted and things like that, and you're like, I can't remember what I just read. That's fine. Something like this is nice because what it will do is it will read along with you, which means you're keeping up with it, and it just kind of keeps you. It's not saying we don't get distracted. We still do, but it will keep you on pace so that you're keeping up with the recording because you're reading along with it. So that does help us as well. So anything that helps. All right, these are 2 other apps that I like. Structured is the one that I used to use, so that's why there's not much detail on that one, because I'm waiting for that subscription to run out. I still have it. I moved my stuff over to Motion, which is that second one. The website's usemotion.com, but it's just Motion is the name of the program. And I have the paid version of that. These are both really nice, depends on what you're looking for. So with Structured, it's great because you can see the colors, and the point where I just took a screenshot of my screen the day that I did this, and you can see that towards the bottom, you can see the dots are half colored because that was a blank space. But you could have everything from waking up to brushing your teeth to showering, all of that. But you can also put in like events, like class, right? And again, I haven't put anything in Structured, so it wasn't showing anything on there. But you can see like, here's your class time. This is my, driving time. This is my whatever. And then you can also put in tasks. So you can say, these are the various things I have to do today. I have to write this report. I have to study. I have to do these things. And what you can do is you tell it how long you want to do that. It's going to take me an hour to write the report. So the nice thing is it keeps you on track because the color just gradually goes down the day. And so now if you sit there and say, okay, I have like this one, it says case study report. Now I had entered that in, I typed that in just for demo purposes before I screenshot this, I added a task to it. So with that case study report, now all of a sudden half of that so when that starts, that thing gradually gets colored as it goes. So now I gave myself however long that was, 30 minutes. Yeah. So I gave myself 30 minutes. Sorry, the screen's as big as you guys are larger on the screen. So 30 minutes I gave myself to write the case study. All right, I could do that. So now what it's doing is that means that I have to focus for 30 minutes. I can say I can't do anything but this case study, right? Nope, don't check my email. Nope, can't do Facebook. Nope, I can't do this. Because 30 minutes, I'm focusing on that because what I'm doing is I'm giving myself that hyper focus moment, knowing that I have a task in there that says check emails. I have a task in there that says I have 20 minutes to look at Facebook. But once that 20 minutes is up, I have to get back to work, which other guys were sitting there going, oh, but that's cool, right? And we're on social media and we all of a sudden lose track of time. Or maybe you want to go and throw a ball for the dog, or you want to go for a hike. You can schedule all those things in and then at least they're accounted for. But you say, all right, I have this time, and you're keeping yourself like, I need to get back home because back to school. I need to do this. I need to study. So you're giving yourself framed out moments. There is a feature on there that will give you kind of a focus where all of a sudden you get a timer over the screen that says, okay, 15 minutes. So now you can see it off the corner of your eye while you're working. And you can say almost like, all right, I can do this. I can get through these other couple minutes. I can do this. So it does help. I did move to Motion because the thing with Structured is that once you put a task in, that task, if you miss that task, which happens often, right? You do something and all of a sudden somebody comes in. I know it happens in my office. That's why I switched to Motion. Whereas all of a sudden I'd be in there and I'd have all these things. All right, I'm going to do the budget. I'm going to do all these things. And then somebody would come in my office and start talking, and I look down and I'd see 5 tasks. I'd see the colors going by and they never got done. So, but the problem was that now I had to go back and say, all right, what tasks I had to do? I have to move them manually forward, which is fine. You can do that. But if you get easily interrupted, moving them forward is not, not the end of the world, but it does have to be done. The thing with motion is that it moves everything forward for you. So I put, I have on there, I have my check emails. That goes on every day. It tells me to check my emails. I gave myself a task. I have to do the transfer challenges. I have to update what was the firmware for my camera. I have to do it IRB. Okay, I have to do all those things, right? But obviously, as I go along throughout the day, I'm gonna miss, and those things I know are still on there because I still haven't done them. But that's February. But so some of those things, if I missed them, then what they're going to do is they're going to automatically reschedule to the next available time slot, or they start bumping things down. So you can prioritize things. So you're like, yeah, this is a priority. What it's going to do is it's going to keep pushing other tasks forward so that task keeps taking up that space until you check it off and you say that you've done it. It's going to do it. It's going to just keep pushing things. So you don't have to worry about missing something. It just keeps moving it forward. You can also basically say, hey, Siri, new motion task. And what it will do is then it will say, what's the task? And I can say, write an email to the dean for this. And, it'll take a half an hour and do that. Or, hey, I'm writing my final report for such and such a class. It's going to take me 6 hours to write this report and should be broken up over hour time slots. So what it's going to do is it's going to break it up automatically over 6 hours over various time slots so that I can do it in half an hour or hour time slots so that I'm not doing it all at once, but it does it all by itself. Again, if I miss it, it just keeps moving it along. And then the yellow things you see those are actual events. So that was, those are various things that I actually had meetings or classes that I'm teaching. The nice thing with this is not that most people are using this as a student, but that booking option that you see with the paperclip, I use that. If you look at the bottom of my emails, you'll notice that and below my signature that there's links that says schedule a meeting with Professor Shea. And you can click on that and you can actually schedule a Zoom or phone meeting or in-person meeting with me. And I actually have it set so if it's in person, it won't let you schedule it until the next day. If it's Zoom or on phone, it will let you do the same day, but then it always keeps like half-hour blocks from anything else so that there's a half-hour buffer before and after anything. If you're trying, I can schedule anything I want on my calendar whenever I want it. But if you were trying to auto-schedule something and push it to my calendar, it's going to make sure that it's because it doesn't know that, something. So I can put drive time in to make sure that things aren't, that you don't get too close to something else and things like that. So those are nice little features that Motion has. But the key thing with that is when they're talking about scheduling is make sure that colors help because, when you see something, you're like, all right, you could differentiate between tasks. But again, put things on there. Keep to your schedule. Using symbols helps to help you identify things. But again, schedule items out and stick to those commitments. If you don't do something, then you do need to reschedule that. You do need to reschedule the class, the online class time or your study time or whatever it is. Those are important. All right, so that was the end of that. Any questions? Kind of open the floor. Doesn't matter what the topic was. Any questions with anything that I covered that you guys want, or any areas of studying, note taking, or anything that you have trouble with that you want some advice or recommendations on? Which recorder to have, or you can go. I mean, Best Buy or most things have really good like dictators. You can go like again, most of those electronic stores, Best Buy I know has some good ones, but you can get them at pretty much any store that sells electronics nowadays. They have just electronic recorders and dictators. If you want really high quality ones, B&H Photos has things meant for podcasting. But nowadays with podcasts being so prevalent, I mean, it used to be a dictator, a little tiny little thing, and those are easy. I have that's what I used in college, was just a tiny little thin dictator. If you Google dictator or something like that, or miniature recorder, it doesn't have to be the highest quality, but you can find most things. Again, you're going to find some really nice ones out there due to podcasting now, you can find some really nice ones. I have a miniature one. It didn't cost me much. I do have a podcast. So I have some really nice recorders that I can plug microphones into. I have some really nice recorders. I do video editing and stuff like that as well, Vince. So I have those where I can hide those around the room. Those are much more expensive. But for just the Rode, I got it. It's from Zoom, not Zoom like we're on now. It's same word, ZOOM. But the Zoom recorders that are made, you can get them through like B&H Photo, things like that. Those are really nice recorders. They do good quality. But any like Audio Technica or any of those, they all make good products. Sony makes good products. But the Zoom recorder, I just have one that's just this tiny little thing that I can bring on the road if I'm going to a conference and I know that I'm going to be able to record people. I use that. So things like that, and you can get different tracks on those. So those are very, very nice recorders. Yeah. Again, anything that records anything that you have works for the most part nowadays. I just say phone because everyone has their phones on them now. But yeah, you can get those from Both Electronics. Podcasting, they're more available. Any other questions with any areas of studying or note taking that you find more difficult than others? No, you guys are doing good. All right. So you guys can always find me. I know a lot of you have Cape Cod emails. I know some. How many of you are from outside Cape Cod Community College? I know a lot of you. I saw the emails. A lot of them are personal emails too. Were any of you outside of Four Seas? No. Yeah, if you got we're offering another one in April. If you guys have any family friends, this is open to anybody. This does not just the college. I know I'm getting a lot from the college, but if anybody from anywhere, family, friends, siblings, colleagues, whatever, by all means, put the word out. That's what I'm here for. Love to get anybody helped on doing this, but but you guys can always find me if you're in the college system. It's D Shea, my first and last name, at the Cape Cod email address. You can find me in the system pretty quick. I'm up here on the Bridgewater campus. So if you ever need to find me, I'm on the Bridgewater State University campus through Cape Cod, but this is our own little Cape Cod suite up here, hanging out up in Bridgewater. So you can find me up here if you guys ever have questions too. All right. But I'm pretty quickly found in the college directory. Absolutely. All right, anytime. Yeah, if you guys ever come up with any creative questions or complex things you run into, by all means, reach out. I'm here for you. All right. Have a good one.